Are you guys excited? You know what's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen.
I think we're just here for a good chat.
Fine. Yeah. So
banter.
I'm just so bored with lockdown that any kind of sort of talking is great. Like
any human interaction.
Yeah, basically.
Well, yeah, human interaction that isn't a 3-year-old toddler that wants to play Doc McStuffins 24/7.
Other children's shows are available.
Is Doc McStuffins an actual thing? I thought you just like said words.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing.
That's like, I love like, you just see a boardroom and everyone's like, right, we need something. What have we got? What profession? Roulette wheel, and it just spins. It just lands on Doc. And it's like, all right, we needed some sort of like ethnicity implied. Spin it again. Mick. All right, cool. We've got something that's maybe Scottish, maybe Irish. All right, spin it again. Stuffins. Who the fuck puts Stuffins on the roulette wheel? Now we're stuck with Doc McStuffins.
Can you guess from the name what the show's about?
I'm gonna guess that it's a crazy alcoholic Irish doctor who he was a doctor, but because he's an alcoholic, he got fired, and now he's a taxidermist because it's the only kind of like operating he can do is like basically gutting out animals and stuffing them.
I mean, this is why Phil doesn't do children's shows, really.
It's not explained.
But I would watch that.
It's not explained to say yes, and that's what we watch. That's what we let our children watch.
Our children? Do we have more than one now?
One of them is stuffed.
Gosh,
that's so funny.
I don't think we should just reveal what Doc McStuffin's about. We'll just leave it at that.
I'm gonna like look it up on the Wikipedia. I'll call it that. This is what the podcast will be called. It'll just be like Neil and Jessie Drysdale, Doc McStuffins. I love it. You guys doing good? You all right?
Yeah, I think so. We've came out of the Aberdeen mini lockdown. We had, which has been good. We're allowed to have people back inside our house and go shopping. Like, when did that happen? Today, actually. Today's the first day.
Really? No, today? Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So that's been nice. It's kind of annoying going back into a kind of mini lockdown again.
Yeah, well, we're still in ours.
Are you?
For like 4 weeks or something. Yeah.
Oh.
Manchester.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So that's okay. I sat inside a coffee shop today with Rachel, which was nice.
Yeah.
Did you drink much coffee?
Bit of normality.
Yeah, she drank loads.
She's a big coffee addict.
Makes sense.
She's because watching all that Doc Mick stuff. It is really.
Yeah, that'll do it. Once you've watched a few of them, you're onto the hard stuff.
Oh my God.
She's like rocking up to Costa and she's like, give me the strongest stuff you've got. Yeah. Well, you're 3, so we're not giving you any alcohol, but here's a coffee.
And she's like, whatever. She undoes her own like vodka.
She just pours in the whiskey. Triple espresso.
I mean,
1 part espresso, 8 parts whiskey. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it's been okay. I think we were saying like we've discovered how much more like introverted we are on a certain level through lockdown. Like if we didn't have a toddler and lockdown could kind of go on indefinitely, we're quite happy with each other's company and books and TV and whatever other random hobbies we've kind of started picking up. Like I think it's harder when you've got kids only because they aren't quite so happy with just chilling all time, all day.
You should have had me as a kid.
There we go.
Yeah, I think that depends. Well, some kids are different.
Yeah, some kids are different. My kid is very high energy. I mean, it's kind of go all day.
It's probably all the coffee, to be fair.
Yeah, maybe we should cut that out. But yeah, like otherwise, like I think it's given us just like, I don't know, there's a pause in life, and sometimes just that pause, like, it's always like, okay, after this bit it'll quiet down, and it never does, and then all of a sudden it does, and it's like, oh, that stuff didn't really need that, oh, this actually cut that out, and all these like societal things that are expected of you are no longer there, and you're like, actually I like not having all of these things. I like picking what I want. Like, I want to hang out with these people when we can, or I want to interact with these people. You're not in forced social situations that you kind of go along with because you've always had to. So it's kind of been nice on that level to just be like, I don't have to put myself in those societal situations, I guess. That's been nice. And just, it's like, I don't know, like you knew you weren't loving those things, but now you have that opportunity to just really like go, okay, when we get back to normal or a sense of normality or whatever the new normal is going to look like, I'm actually going to make decisions consciously of what I want and don't want in my life.
Yeah. So we're having a divorce.
So I know that you guys were like, before pandemic, like church was kind of a thing of like, oh, don't even know what the deal is, where we're at, like what's going on. Like, have you felt like pandemic has been like a nice break? Because I know I speak to loads of people that are like, well, this is kind of convenient because now I can just like not pretend to like church. I just don't have to go. Like, have you done like Zoom stuff, or like have you just kind of gone?
I think I listened to 2 sermons, so it's difficult because you got a kid. So like most churches, they've quickly decided to kind of catch up and in technology wise, but they're not perfect. So I think our church is quite small. How's it, like 100 people maybe, which is for the UK it's average, I guess, but not necessarily technology. So when it came in, they quickly got up in the Zoom and tried to make the best it is. But they think they do it every like Sunday morning. But having a kid with no children's church, I think we're not going to listen to it anyway. So I think we tried the one and then I gave up. But I wasn't overly fussed. I think me and Jessie have both been kind of. I think honestly, for the last 2 years, we've been going to church and not listening anyway. So it's kind of like, what I mean? We went out of like, we should go, or like, because we've always done, we've grown up going to church, so we're going to go.
Yeah.
We're not getting anything out of it. The sermons are like, no disrespect to whoever's necessarily doing the sermons, but it's like.
I think we're just in different space in our faith where like either morality sermons or it's a lot of sermons that we've kind of heard before and things that we're working through that we're maybe on a different level with, or we're pulling apart, and what they're preaching, we're kind of like, this is something that I'm not really on board with now. So that paired with the fact that you've got a toddler that is going to like a nursery that doesn't want a parent to not be with them, or, it's just a lot of things where like, we've just kind of been a bit disconnected. And then that paired with like a deconstruction phase of our faith is, I think, maybe more for myself than for you.
I just never really gave a shit. So for you're, so, what I mean? So nothing's overly changed as such, but you've definitely been more, I would say you've been deconstructing. I think I've been deconstructing all my life and I just don't care. No, that's not so true, but like, I'm kind of like, way of worship. I've never been the kind of person like, I don't know.
You've always been more laid back.
Yeah, I'm very laid back.
It's just your personality.
So even when we were a kid, like we got taught like gays are bad or whatever, but I just was like, I just didn't believe it. I didn't necessarily.
That was like lesson 3 in the Drysdale house, right? It was like, no, listen up, kids. Lesson 3, gays are bad. Okay, we'll pick up at lesson 4 next week.
I think like your experience as pastor's kid seems, from knowing your mother, it was vastly, vastly different because of who your mom was. Like, she literally was this amazing person that was like, whatever, like, just chill. Like, it was just vastly different from my upbringing in church. Like, people would be like, your kids are being loud. And your mom was like, so they're kids. Like, it was just very, very different. So I wonder if that, like, had a lot of bearing. Your mom always gave you guys kind of the space to explore your Christianity.
I think she protected us a lot because she didn't want us to go through what she went through. I think when she was learning to be a Christian, she asked lots of questions and was turned down a lot. So I think when it came to us, she was like, Yeah.
And your mom also evolved through her faith too, because she read voraciously.
Crazy about it.
She was always looking for the next thing to read. They also like looking for like the next like speaker to listen to or whatever. She was always like, I want to know more, rather than just be like, I've been taught this, that, and the other. I think I'll settle with that. She was always like, what's next?
I think you had a more of a normal
I don't know.
That's not a more common pastor kids upbringing of like, you know.
I had the
like
conservative
the church is watching
evangelical American upbringing, even though it wasn't in America for the most part.
Yeah.
Which sounds crazy. So
you had a lot more pressure. I think we probably had, I don't know, the Drysdales just don't give a shit, really, generally speaking. So I think that helps where like, so I don't know, that's just, we as kids didn't care what people thought, or some of our parents as well, but I don't know, I feel like you care more. So like you had that pressure put on for your parents, so like you have to do this, and not necessarily on purpose, but they push that onto you. So you have a lot more. I guess you felt that more. Well, we
I guess there's
a
lot of things that go.
I don't know. I think we were quite rebellious as a
family in general.
Yeah, although it's interesting. My memory's crap. You guys know
not
that.
In a bad way.
No, and like that's the thing. I don't remember. I remember like Dad was always a bit more strict than Mum. I always like remember like I don't know like Dad would like get really upset if we swore, and swearing to him was like nothing. You know, like it was just whatever. You can say crap. I remember like, do you remember, Neil, one time Dad got us all gathered around the table, and Dad will probably listen to this because it's like all of us. So Dad, you can laugh about this as well. But like we're all sitting around the dining table, and like he's like, kids, you need to gather around, everyone sit down. I really need to talk to you about something very serious. And he was just like, guys, he's like, I got an email this morning. And he's like, I have to apologize. I have to ask for your forgiveness. He says, because it turns out that the word crap comes from a man called Thomas Crapper, who invented the toilet, and it's not a swear word, which is funny because it was like one of those like circular emails that it's not even true. Anyway, it's kind of funny, but he was just like,
not true.
He would get really upset about the word crap. No, Thomas Crapper is not a real person, and it was like
because of that talk. Maybe stuff has been pushed onto me that I didn't know. Yeah.
But like, you know, he was a little more strict with certain things, and he's like chilled out so much over the years. Everyone chills out, right, when they grow up. Well, not everyone, but I think a lot of us start to chill out more. Whereas Mum was always like, you know, if she stubbed her toe in the next room, you probably hear her yell like, "Ah, fuck," or something. Like she was like a bit more chill in different areas, or at least shows to care in different ways in different areas. But like, I don't really remember it's really weird. My memory is bad, but I don't remember like when I talk to like PKs, you know, like talk to someone like you, Jessie, who's like grown up in like a evangelical Christian home where pastors' kids or, you know, like, or Christian leaders, like it feels like there's like expectation. You guys, like you're the face of the family, like people are looking at you and you represent the church, the Christianity, the pastors. If you're not doing well, it reflects poorly on us. I don't really ever really feel like I had that. Maybe I'm just like, maybe I forgot. Maybe I like, or I was just stupid enough that I didn't pick up on it. And I just was like, oh, nothing matters. Or maybe that was the case. Like maybe it was a bit different for us. I don't really know. What do you remember that kind of feeling at all, Neil? Like that you represented
to people of the family to remember things, but
yeah,
my memory's terrible as well. But no, I don't. I never feel. I felt the only thing we felt pressured was when we were under 16 was you had to go to church.
Yeah, like
there wasn't an option of not going to church. But no, I don't feel like there's any pressure to perform or to sit nicely or. I don't think that was necessary. Yeah, again, I don't think that was necessarily to annoy the people in the church. Like they weren't saying, "Oh, even they were just trying to protect us," is what my thought was. But yeah.
Because from what I hear you say, Jessie, and what I know obviously as well, like that was more of a component to like what it was like growing up within.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, based on, you know, that verse in the New Testament about, you know, how, you know, persons in leaderships has to control their family. Mm-hmm. And so not your children or your spouse being out of control, rebellious, whatever, is a reflection on your ability to lead. As a result of that, your children always have to behave, at least in public. It's funny because I had a really long conversation with my sister today out of the blue about her faith walk. And it was a really good conversation, but I shared this anecdote with her. And she was like, I had no clue. But it'll always stick in my mind. But after a service one Sunday, we were always the last to leave church on a Sunday. Like, everyone leaves church and we're still there. I don't know why, but like, so us kids are bored. We want to go home. We want to go have lunch. So I'm messing about at the front of church. My sister's there amongst other people. And to me, it was just another Sunday. My mom was so like angry at me as we left the church. And I was like, oh, like, what's going on? And we get home and she pulls me into the room and she is angry. She is like proper upset. And she's like, I can't believe like you're, you know, hurting your sister in church on the front steps, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whoa, like, what is going on? Like, I have no, I'm like, Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. And seemingly what transpired was that some lady in church saw my sister and I messing about and thought I was bullying my sister, went to find my mother, relayed her interpretation of what the situation was, and was like, I can't believe your oldest daughter, you know, blah, blah, blah. She's the oldest, blah, blah, blah. And so we got home and it was straight away like, your bad behavior, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whoa, I don't know what's going on. So like that kind of stuck with me because it was very much of like, A, I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. So it was always very much, you're the oldest, you're responsible. B, we're the pastor's kids. We help. We're involved, we behave, we don't rebel. There's a lot of expectations, not vocalized necessarily by my parents to that a certain extent. Like it is a lot of unspoken, but it is also a lot of expectation that is put upon you by members of the church. So even if it's not your parents that are saying, we expect this, 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 and this, and essentially perfection from you, it is the church in itself that are looking at you. Why is your kid sitting in the back row and not in the front? Why is your kid sitting on this side of the church and not this side of the church? Why is your kid not volunteering in this ministry? Why is your kid not here this evening? Like it's just a reflection, and it's a lot of pressure on parents too. I should say that, like, although I am feeling and working through a lot of like deconstruction of faith and church trauma, I think my parents did what they thought was best at the time. They are loving of us, and they, again, like, they were in the church and they did what they were taught was best, the best way to raise your children. So I can't harbor any like resentment towards them for that. I think that expectation was what they were taught, or what they were kind of a situation they were put into. So yeah. But it means that for us, it's a whole different thing for when it comes to Rachel. Like, we, in raising our daughter, want something different for her. We want her to have that. More like what you guys had, probably.
Poor. No, yeah, you're right, though. We're very much... I think everyone's a bit like that. Well, no, you gotta go 2 ways. You either copy your parents or you do differently or whatever. So, yeah, it's interesting how grassy people are in church. They're so quick to pick on, like,
yeah, like this woman felt the need to go and be like, you know what?
Yeah, let's take a Scottish term. What's a non-word for grassing?
Snitching, or
Snitching, yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, we had that so much, Neil, right? Like random, like people in our church, like going, "Oh, your kids are," and it was always something that was like, just like, that's a thing. Oh, I didn't really even know that was in the category you're not allowed to do.
Yeah.
Like, it was never like, oh, found your kid, he's like running an orgy just behind the school sheds. Like, it's like, no. It was like, your kid is playing football in the back garden and he's kicking the ball against the church wall. And it's like, yeah it's a wall. Like, I didn't realize that the wall was sacred and I'm somehow spitting on the grave of Jesus. Or,
I don't think I ever know. It's probably me that was kicking the ball as well.
Yeah.
I don't remember that. Maybe that wasn't passed on to me. Maybe they told Dad and blamed you or something. But yeah, it's weird though. It's really weird. Like, you're not meant to put your feet up on the chairs and this rubbish like that.
Yeah, it's weird. But most of my like weird Christian hang-ups that I've developed, like I developed after coming out of the churches, like that our dad was the pastor. So it was only when I left those churches and started to join my own churches as like an adult or like late teens and stuff that I like started to adopt some like really crazy stuff. And maybe it was because I didn't really care as a kid. I think it was a thing of like your parents are just like, you're going to this church, you're under 16, get to the church, and then you just don't connect. But like, I don't remember our parents being like trying to instill a lot of those things. Like, I don't ever remember like a big long talk about how you're only allowed to date Christians, or I don't even remember having a talk about like no sex before marriage or anything. Like I remember one talk, I don't know if you remember this for yourself, Neil, but I remember one talk with either of our parents about sex. Like that's how like stand up, they just didn't talk about that stuff really at all, at least not with me. And it was probably because I'm pretty sure my dad caught me like having a wank or something at some point. Like, Jamie, he's obviously gone, oh crap, he's now an adult, he's like looking at a picture of Sarah Michelle Gellar or whoever was like amazing at that time, like for a teenage boy. And like literally one day I'm like walking through the kitchen to go out the back door and go play with my friends or whatever. And he's like, Phil, he's like, you know what sex is, right? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you know, you should use a condom, right? And I'm like, yeah, okay. And he's like, good. And that was our entire sex talk. That is the most I've talked
awkward.
Either of my parents.
Well done.
Yeah, exactly. Round of applause. But like,
I mean,
you had a better talk. I think my dad, probably the same, probably saw me having a wag or whatever, but like,
it just sounds like we were just like constantly having masturbation.
Been like, oh my goodness.
we were, that's why we all have glasses in the family. We're all blind from wanking. But I remember him having that chat about homosexuality. It was like, if you ever come out the closet, I'll kick you back in.
What were you wanking to?
What?
No, separate situations. But
I'm glad you clarified.
No, you McGregor. If I was going to go gay.
I mean, we all would.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So like, because I think there was an element.
I don't remember what he said. I think he's like, do you want to have the sex talk? And I was like, please, Dad, no, we've done this in school. Which I think left it at that. But I feel kind of bad. He probably was like, this is my dad moment or whatever. I did the same when he offered to teach me how to shave. And I said, no, I've got this. I felt really bad going back in time thinking, oh, that was like his dad-son moment. And he's obviously never done this with Phil or Dave either. And I was like, oh, I'm still, poor dad lost all his dad moments.
So, wait, so just to back up there. So your dad's like, use a condom. So in your experience in church in general, what was like, because obviously I grew up with purity culture, like a major thing. Was that your experience as well? Or
But I think like, so for me, when that happened, I reckon I was maybe like 14, maybe about 14, maybe 15. So, you know, like for a lot of kids, he's leaving it quite late. Right. But for me, not at all, because I didn't even leave the house, never mind talk to girls. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what he was thinking. There was no chance of me having sex at any point with any human. Like the odds of me being able to talk anyone in this world into having sex with me was very slim at that point or ever. I
saw pictures of that haircut, so I mean,
there was the shaved head with the fringe. It went straight up.
Oh no, I saw the triangle, like the brushed out, like triangle hair. That was with me.
Yeah, I don't think I was quite rocking that by 14. I hope. But there was this thing of like, I guess we grew up in like churches that were quite small, didn't have a lot of teenagers and other kids. And so we didn't really have like youth group talks and things like that until we kind of moved and Dad wasn't a pastor anymore. He went and did his own kind of charity stuff. And then we could pick what church we were part of. And Mum and Dad picked a church with like 100 youth. And suddenly in that moment, it was like, oh, there's youth group talks, and youth group talks are like, hey, stop masturbating. Don't look at porn. Never have sex ever, except for like, you know, the second you get married, you can have sex as much as you want and it's going to be amazing, even though you've demonized it for 10 years straight. You know, like that was kind of like my first introduction to that world. I feel like maybe, again, my memory might be very like sketchy, but I don't remember that being much of a culture, possibly because like, if like it was just our family, right? I mean, 4 kids and maybe a couple of our friends that were getting together in church at that age bracket, super awkward for like mum or dad, who basically was probably whoever's going to teach the youth, to be like, all right, kids, gather around. We're going to talk about sex. It's like, well, 80% of the like group is like your kids. Like, I get it. And given that they didn't seem to be as keen or ready or equipped to have a in-depth sex talk, feel comfortable about talking about sex as we grew up and stuff like that, like probably would have been really awkward for them to try and engage with that. And their churches were like all full of old people. They're probably not talking about sex because most of them have got it down. I imagine, I hope. I don't know. It was a bit of a weird component because it did come in very late for me. And I guess it's just lucky that I was just so awkward that I never actually like, that hadn't even been a thing I could explore. It's something I wanted to explore, but never. And then, so it's only when I started going to other churches and started doing my own thing and being around big youth groups and stuff, that was when I was like, oh, that's a thing. You would never have sex with someone ever outside of marriage. Oh, that's a thing. You would like, I don't know, like homosexuality is wrong. I guess I must have picked up on that on some level, that homosexuality was wrong, but
yeah, I don't remember like sermons about that.
No.
I think even when we were a kid, it was still very societally wrong as well.
I don't remember many people in our schools
like,
or anything being gay or.
Well, that's nobody was gay.
Everyone was closeted.
I mean,
right, in our schools.
There maybe was a gay person, but you'd have that expression, that's so gay, isn't that's so rubbish.
Yeah, like
right.
Like so now, I think we're living in a better society where we're a bit more understanding. I think we grew up thinking gay was bad because not just at church, but
societally. Yeah, that's true.
So it wasn't so weird. I think it's only as you grew up now, as society's come along, and the church has stayed still, but some people in the church have moved with society, and they're like, why is the church not coming along with us or whatever? Like most things, including, I don't know, even like the little things like music, like, come on, hurry up. But, I don't know. Yeah, it's a bit
funny.
I don't know. I think, when we moved up to Aberdeen and we went to that church, I mean, that was, I mean, there was other kids our age. We had to talk about purity, and there was always
boys
some
and girls separate.
Yeah,
every time.
I always remember one of the youth events we went to, like a summer not field event, what do you call it? Like a summer camp or whatever.
Right.
There was this guy, and he always had a guy talk. And like he tried to like, oh, is there any guys in here? And everyone, whoa! And I was just like, today we're going to talk about sex. And I'm like, yeah, sex. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, only if you're married, so yeah. And it's like quiet. It was all like children. And you're like, what? It's so weird. He talked about like, I don't know, sex. And I'm like, and later on I found that this guy was having an affair.
Huh.
So like during this talk about, sex only during marriage.
Well, he was having sex during marriage.
He was
not just with his wife.
It's honestly, it was just like
precise that.
He's like, ooh, a loophole.
I did encounter in my teenage years that kind of purity thing, not to the extent.
What, you mean you didn't have purity rings? And
well, no, we're not. Like, I think the UK is a bit.
Just doesn't fly as much in the UK.
You've never got the rings that came with the books, I think.
Yeah.
But you probably had a lot worse as a woman, I imagine.
Oh man, I Kissed Dating Goodbye was like.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know what that is. Cracking an egg. Or?
Just bashed over our heads.
Oh.
That's a weird thing to me though, Jessie, because like you were in like a weird culture anyway, right? Because you're in like this quasi American European combo over in Belgium. And like Europe, not known for its like frugality, like this kind of like frigidness, like this puritanical, like that's not a European thing overly. So, and yet, how did that like play out?
Funny anecdote. So I grew up in an Assemblies of God church, founded by, so obviously there's the Assemblies of God in the UK, but this was the American body of the Assemblies of God. So it's different. And it was founded by American missionaries, and most of the leadership, boards, etc., were American missionaries from the Assemblies of God. In fact, every single senior pastor that I know of was a senior pastor from the Assemblies of God in America. And so it was like this really weird, like American transplant into basically the outskirts of Brussels. And I remember this being an issue at one point where the Belgian government were trying to determine whether it was a cult. because it wasn't a recognized denomination of Christianity.
Wow.
There's more to that story, but yeah, it was an awkward, like, so I remember my dad being on the news and having to be like, well, no, we're not a cult.
Wait, you said that on the news?
Well, not in literal terms, but like essentially it was kind of like.
Is it news on the television news?
Yes.
Oh, if we could ever find that clip, that'd be amazing.
Yes.
So yeah, it was kind of a weird thing because I had grown up in this, and the concept of us being a cult was like, what? Like, what? This is weird. So yeah, it was kind of like a weird American church trying to be international because we had a lot of people from a lot of different countries. Brussels itself is really, really international. It's the seat of the European Union. There's a NATO there as well. There's people from everywhere. So you had people from all over the world, even like there's a lot of universities in the area. So there's a lot of people there for studies, etc. So yeah, like I grew up around a lot of people from a lot of different countries, which was great. But it was really interesting that the core of the church was always American evangelicalism. So yeah, so that had a definite bearing. So a lot of the like worship music was brought in from the States. Even like my dad led a French speaking service in the evening. A lot of the songs were translated into French rather than like
French songs.
The
French have never written any worship songs.
Have they not?
Godless, a lot of them. Never come up with a song once.
I was like, oh, really? But actually, now come to think of it, that's, yeah, okay.
One day, one of them was like, I've got an idea. Why don't we just translate all other songs into our language and we'll never have to write a song?
I mean,
those songs are weird though. When you sing, when you sing like a translated song, well, I have no idea what I'm singing, but I'm like in Germany or somewhere and they're like, all right, we're going to sing a song. And you're like, okay. And you kind of just like reading the words, like kind of phonetically trying to sing along to tune. And then you're halfway through and you're like, oh, I'm singing like Back to the Heart of Worship by Matt Redman in German. And it kind of works. Like, how do you translate? I mean, words are different, especially German. Like some words are like 10 minutes long. How did you manage to cram that in like syllables? Like, I mean,
it's definitely amazing. Not a word for word literal translation. But
that's probably what it is. I wouldn't know. So there you go.
Yeah. So like, yeah, it was kind of like interesting because I think their core was American evangelical, trying to kind of be more international, but definitely coming back because a lot of the like materials for her children's church and Sunday school and even just like adult Bible studies and the youth group materials, it was all imported from the States.
Wow.
Now, to be fair, at the time, the amount of stuff like that produced within Belgium or within Europe,
probably not so big.
Not so much existing. So they made use of what they had. Also, it's provided by the Assemblies of God from the States a lot of times. So that's what's easier to come by. So I think that had a huge influence on what was taught within the church because it's American evangelicalism. Even though Belgium is a little more like, well, Belgium is in itself, if you were going to say it's a Christian country, it's more Catholic, but there is a huge amount of mostly people would probably be like, I'm Catholic because their parents were Catholic, because their grandparents were Catholic, but they themselves are either agnostic or atheist. There's not a huge amount of people that still practice Catholicism or Christianity in any form.
Right.
So that was always, they always said that missionaries would always say Europe is a difficult mission field because people don't feel the need for God.
Right.
So as opposed to like other countries, but then that's also because there's a level of socialism within society that looks after people. So when you're not in as desperate situations as
right.
It's hard to have a savior complex when you go to countries that have healthcare.
Yeah, exactly.
No, we're good actually. Thanks. Free healthcare.
Yeah. But it is interesting because it was always a little more difficult to get locals involved in the church or even just come along to the church. I remember a family of missionaries saying like that one of the neighbors, as they moved into the house that they were moving into, had brought over a bottle of wine and like they couldn't drink. Like they'd taken this vow of not drinking. So they turned it down. They're like, oh, sorry, we can't take it. We don't drink. and their neighbors didn't speak to them again.
It's such a cultural thing in Belgium.
But it's a cultural thing. Like, it's like you just
kids
say
have a
things.
glass of wine at the age of 7 or something.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, with our family, we, age of 14, Christmas dinner, here you go, have a glass of wine. And then like legal drinking age is 16. That was culture shock when I came to the UK, because everyone all of a sudden was 18 and was like, "Whoa, we could drink!" And I was like, "Dude, I've been doing this for ages. What's the big deal?" But yeah, I have like a really weird mix of like Belgian culture within me, because I'm half Belgian, and that's American culture within me, because I'm half American. And the church I went to was American. The school I went to was Belgian. So like, it's just very like weird mix. And I guess like in some ways I don't know if you ever heard the term third culture kid, where like I neither belong here nor there entirely. Yeah. And then now I live in Scotland. So it's really like, where do I belong?
Scotland.
So yeah, it was just a really interesting background to have. But it definitely was American evangelicalism that I grew up with. Because that's what the church was that we attended, and then my dad passed away.
I remember the first time, I think we were dating, or we were married at that point, maybe dating.
We were dating.
And we went into the church, and it was like, "Welcome to the best church in the whole of Belgium." And I was just sitting there like, "All right, very humble of you guys." And I'm going to slide into the back row. I'm here, and I'm from just your mom or your sister there as well.
I think my mom.
And like we're trying to, and she's like, no, sit up the front, sit up with all her friends, or like, you don't even actually know anyone, it's all your mom's friends or whatever. And I was like, she's wanting to introduce me as the son. She doesn't know me yet, she doesn't know how evil I am, but like, she's like, look at this perfect boy, my daughter's or whatever. All right, so you slouch down, you're like, all right, just to get this over with. And it's just like, it was like it was like an American
foreign
church.
To you, like going to
speaking to people.
No, but like, was that foreign to you to be like in that church of like, it was very like, although international with lots of people, it definitely was very American.
No, we grew up at, or the first church we went to wasn't my dad's, was the International Baptist Church or whatever. So it was like a bigger version of that. But I remember the first one. So I'm trying to slouch down and hide, and then like they do this welcome thing when they're like, "Is anyone new?" And they have, not every church, however, but like they have this microphone. I'm like slouching out even more. I do not want to like. And people wonder why the church numbers are dropping. This is exactly the reason why. Okay,
it's not made
your
for
first time here have a microphone, but your mom literally runs up, and grabs the microphone, and
You're exaggerating.
She's like, "Neil, I found the second coming of Jesus, and he's going to marry Jessie." No, not quite.
No,
I was just like, "Oh,
she stood up and took the mic and was like, "I want to introduce you all."
It was the most horrible thing ever.
And introduced him in front of a church of 500 people.
Yeah, and I'm trying to look at the exits, like maybe it's too late. Like this is, people are going to want to talk, because your dad used to be the pastor of that church as well, and your mum is a big thing in that church. I was like, oh gosh, people are now really going to talk to me. I have to behave for the next,
That is hard for you.
That's how a pastor's kid feels.
Which is like so like it's so nice when you can get into that person's head. They're like, I want this person to feel welcome, because in their head this is the safest place, nicest place, it's all lovely people, you'll love being here and you'll feel welcome and you'll feel accepted and you'll feel, but like it isn't that for every person, right? Certainly introverts are just like, oh god, kill me now, I have 500 eyes on me.
I mean, to be fair, not all introverts had someone with them that would be like, let me just point you to this
right
person.
No, exactly.
It was usually based on the people who volunteered to stand up and say, hi, I'm new here.
Exactly.
So like, yeah, it wasn't
even then, like, I don't know, it's just a risky thing giving anyone a microphone, isn't it?
Oh yeah, there were definitely instances of regret
like, don't
over
give
the
that
years.
microphone back to
This was a long-standing tradition, and there was definitely instances of maybe we should not have given this person the mic.
I remember one church I was a part of for a while, quite a while. They had like fairly early on of me being there, they had this service where they would have people come up and share testimonies just over and over and over again. And one guy came up and he just grabs the mic and he's like, I've had this revelation, I've been praying and fasting for months now, and like he looked like he'd been praying and fasting for months. He looked like not healthy at all. When you meet people that are like, you're like, well, you take this way too seriously and it's not doing you good. And like he was like unsteady on his feet and he's like, but I had this revelation. He's like, I am the second coming of Christ.
Oh, no.
And you could see the pastors just suddenly going, oh fuck, we're doing how do we deal with this? Because like he's right on the stage in front of like 500 people at the time, because it's a big church, but that was a small group because it was like a more informal kind of testimony thing and worship.
Is there a sermon series on how to fast properly after that? Because I feel like that could
well, like this is crazy. So part of what they did at that church, they did this like outreach thing where you go into the poor areas and you go door to door and you just knock on doors and say, hey, is there any way I could help you? Do you want someone to, take you shopping, help you around the house? Like, we're just here to help. And we genuinely were like, we just want to help. If people get saved, that's fine. But actually, we just want to make people's lives better. It was really quite a beautiful thing. But no joke, I was doing this and I ended up knocking on this guy's door. And he was like about a year and a half later. And he was like in full-blown therapy and was like, he had like psychosis. He literally thought he was like the son of God, and like he thought everyone was out to get him. And I think the church themselves were like paying for it and trying to help him, but also had banned him from appearing in church. He wasn't allowed to come to church anymore and things like, because obviously on some level you can't have this guy coming to church and going, hi, it's Jesus here. Everyone's like, we love you, Jesus, and he's like, thank you, I appreciate it.
Oh god, that should be a TV show.
But like it was a really weird dynamic, but like it's dangerous on some level. I mean, obviously you give the mic to most people and they're not going to do that, but it's kind of funny how we don't really have contingencies for it. Do you know what I mean? Like there's not really a plan for what do we do when someone gets on the stage, because like you could see everyone kind of going, okay, we need to get the mic off this guy. We need to get him off the stage. We need to get him out of here. We need to stop him talking to too many people. And he's standing on the stage in front of 500 people. What do we even do?
Is that not because people who generally take the mic or confident enough to take the mic in a church generally know what the acceptable spiels?
Sure, they've got the social kind of boundaries all kind of mapped
like
out.
The probability of having someone in complete psychosis thinking they're the second coming of Christ are really slim to none.
Gosh, I really wish I was in that room at that moment.
Oh gosh.
Like, honestly, I mean, obviously we want him pretty well. He's obviously not well, but like, to witness that would have been... Yeah.
But I mean, most people who would feel the confidence to go up and take a mic to share a testimony generally know what the acceptable form of testimony is.
Plus, joking aside, we now know what the church would do if Jesus showed up again and grabbed the mic and was like, hi guys, I'm back. Like, we just ditch him with a psychologist and ban him from the church.
If he got that far into the church.
If he got that far in. Oh, that was insane. But yeah, like it's a weird thing, right? Like the whole, like, yeah, just having all eyes on you in the church is like a intense thing. And I guess that growing up in the church on some level, you're aware of that as a kid. Like that's I remember one time dad had like put on like this thing in the church. It was like an outreach to bring people in. And he was like, we're going to have it was like a Britain's Got Talent before Britain's Got Talent. And so it was like people in the church and anyone in the street can come in, and it was basically just a talent show. I guess that's what Britain's Got Talent is, right? It's like you could come in and you could like sing a song or you could do a dance or whatever, and anyone could come in and do it. It was like some kids came in from the school and like he'd put up flyers everywhere and stuff. And I remember like he literally walked into my bedroom one night, which as we've learned is a dangerous thing to do with Drysdale teenage boys. He was like, Phil, get rid of Sarah Michelle Gellar for now. Close that tab. And he was like, Phil, he's like, we don't have enough people for the talent show. I'm going to need you to do something.
Wait, what did you do? Like...
This is so bad. This is the worst, right? And like, literally, he's like, you got to do something. I'm like, Dad, do you even know your own son? I'm like, I have no talent at all. I'm like the least talented human alive.
In 30 minutes now.
Like, I'm like, exactly.
Me beating this levels of Mario Kart.
Like, I can play video games. I can like tinker with computers. I can binge TV shows. That's about it. I could have a really awkward conversation with a girl, maybe. I'm like, I do not have a lot of skills at 14 years old. And he was like, well, he's like, you play the keyboards. And the thing is, I had been getting like maybe like a year of keyboard lessons, one keyboard lesson a month. And I was practicing in between maybe once about an hour before my lesson. You know, like I was not into it at all. I was like still on the first book, you know, like it's just like, and I remember like he's like, just play something on that, and I'm like, what? And I'm like, I can barely play. He's like, just you know, get. And I'm like, so right, we're gonna have me, a kid, get up on stage and like just play solo keyboards off of like the first type of book you would ever play. And I literally can remember it seared into me what song I did. It was it was the song Blowing in the Wind. I don't even know who did that. Was it like Bob Dylan or something like that? Or and I'm like, and I could just literally play it, and I like it would play it in like some sort of weird synth or something.
Wind, isn't it?
No. How many roads can a
walk
down or something like that? I don't know what it was. So I'm literally like, okay, well, so I practiced it like 10 times, and I was like in tears. I remember crying because I didn't want to do it, but I was like, oh, I gotta do it. And so I'm sure like Dad didn't realize how much I didn't want it, or I don't know, maybe Dad was just real full-blown panicking, right? He's been on a talent show, he's got 2 people, and like the whole town is like coming to this talent show. It's his one moment to save everyone, and he's got no one showing up. So Ben, I think basically he had like 3 gigs going on. This is the 3 I remember. There was like 3 kids that were like young 11-year-old girls that were like dancing to the Spice Girls. So they just hit play and then did a dance to the Spice Girls, which was like probably terrible. I don't remember. And then they had the Treasurer, and he came on with like a guitar and sang 2 songs. So he sings his first song, I don't know what it was, and the second song he starts singing, and do you know what it is? My fucking song. My song.
Oh no!
Like, what are the odds of that? Of every song in the world, he sings a song that I've learned to play, and I'm like, oh great! So I'm just like dying.
Have you not been on yet?
No.
Oh no!
And then I get up and I've got to play awkwardly, really badly, just instrumental, the song that this guy just crushed on the guitar, singing with the voice of an angel, and I'm like, I've never felt like more of an idiot in my life. And I don't remember at all how it went or what happened, but I just remember like dying inside. And I'm like, that's the sort of shit that happens to you when you're the pastor's kid, right? I got to bail out the pastor because he managed to get 3 gigs, and like there's 110 people in this building.
Wait, do you mean to tell me that your dad did not give himself a stand-up gig of dad jokes?
I mean, that was him just.
He was the front man. He was the front. He was the. You know, he was the.
That would have been like his second calling.
He was the Anton Deco or whatever. He was the host.
Yeah, he loved that.
Next off, we have a guy I found wanking the server show together. Come on up, Phil.
This guy's a big fan of Buffy and also Blowing in the Wind. Like 66% of our people here tonight. In a minute, we're going to have the Spice Girls come back up and dance to Blowing in the Wind.
I remember the Spice Girls situation because it was, I think they were in my sister's year. So they were like 2 years above me. And they dressed up. So they did like the not Buffy, I've got that in my head now. Britney Spears like shirt tie thing. So the belly, so this is in the church. And basically the entire audience were old people. So nobody else turned up, I think. Like none of the kids or anything. I think it's just the regular old people from the church. And then they left. Dad went to speak to them because they refused to come out. And so Dad's like, oh, let's go check on them. And he came back, but he left his mic on. And he went into the back room and he was like, and they were all saying, like, I'm not going out in front of those old fogies. And they just like, what else did it say? So that there's old people have never even heard of Britney Spears, blah, blah, blah. They're old. And Dad's like, oh, just go and try. But like, so we were all sitting listening to this conversation as well. Amazing.
Oh, this stuff is like, you could write a good comedy sketch show about this stuff for sure.
Based on the lives of
and
pastors.
It's just the life of a pastor's kids.
How many times were you used as a sermon illustration?
Oh, gosh.
Oh, man.
This week we're talking about masturbation.
So yesterday I walked into my son's bedroom.
All 3 of them.
This is traumatic. You guys are talking about this a lot. You need to work through this.
No, we've done plenty of masturbation.
I think my dad needs to walk through this really more than anyone. Oh man, but that's the thing, isn't it? It's just like a normal thing for teenage boys, but like as soon as you incorporate the Christian world, it's like, oh god, what's happening? Like,
well, wait, on that subject though, because obviously, okay, you didn't necessarily grow up for the most part with purity culture, but you have encountered it. From a guy's perspective, what is put upon you in purity culture? I'm just curious because obviously they do the whole split the boys and the girls.
Yeah.
Girls, this is what we're teaching you. Guys, this is what we're teaching you. But you don't, unless you specifically go and look to find out, which you got plenty of other stuff being thrown at you. You don't necessarily do, and you're generally taught this is what it is. Take it. That's it. So yeah, I'm just curious what. I'm sorry, Phil. This is your podcast.
No, it's good. I like this. This is good. Well, Neil, why don't you tell me, like, when we split up into girls and boys groups, and it was like, all right, guys, we're gonna talk about sex. Like, what do you remember from those kind of talks, like in youth group?
I can't really remember.
Were you paying attention?
Neil was like in the bathrooms masturbating or something.
Yeah, I was making out with all the girls, so I never heard that. I can't really remember, to be honest. Like, I remember being really awkward. It's usually somebody we were taught these things by other older people in the youth. Yeah.
I mean, they were basically like 21 at old.
17 or whatever.
Yeah, who were not following what you were preaching or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, masturbation crime. Is like, yeah, you're 17.
A crime. Church police are coming to arrest you.
Yeah. Or a sin, I should say. Yeah, not a crime. That would be amazing. And in the news today, everyone between the ages of 12 and 17 got arrested today. But I don't know. I can't remember. I remember, like, don't touch anything or you'll die.
That's what it boiled down to in your brain.
Yeah, I don't know. God's always watching you.
Oh, that's
like
terrifying,
some kind of creepy pervert. Yeah,
it's a creepy thing, right?
God sees all.
I can't really remember. I mean, I was always the joker growing up anyway, so I just probably found it hilarious and joked through it. But I didn't back to it. I didn't think, I need to, because I guess a group in it. At that age, when you're, a preteen or a teen, you just, someone reaches the Bible, you don't go, look up the Greek. You're just like, you're like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Like, thanks for that. That's encouraging. Thanks for your opinion on it from your upbringing, from the 17-year-old you are. You've obviously lived a vast life, and I can learn from your errors or whatever. But I imagine it's a lot, like, from what I hear though, it's a lot easier for guys of, like, just praying you've been forgiven, because obviously it's hard because women are just sex, like, freaks. I mean, if they're showing their belly buttons sometimes and their knees.
Yeah, my two favorite body parts.
I don't know, like, it's really
I've got like all kinds of pin-ups of like belly buttons and knees as a teenager, just everywhere. Hands, don't come in! I'm looking at knees.
I feel like probably. I don't know. I imagine girls had it a lot worse.
Yeah.
It's
interesting.
A lot of your fault, isn't it? Like when you.
Yeah. But I think like it's weird, like, because I know like we've had people talk on this. I've had quite a few girls come on and talk about and women talking about like how they were affected as young girls by that culture. But I do think there is like this knock-on effect on guys that is definitely not as sinister and as deep reaching, but there's definitely a lot of shame and stuff that goes on, because there is this thing where you're constantly told, like, I remember every time we broke up, it was like basically the first thing they asked was like, all right guys, well, who fell to this week, who sinned, who, like, whatever, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was like, it was basically they were going, all right guys, we're sitting in a circle, 10 young kids, and like, and it's like, and the person that's leading is like, maybe if they're lucky, they're maybe like 22, 23, but they're basically not much more than a kid themselves. And they're like, well, basically asking, okay, kids, who masturbated this week? Super awkward and inappropriate question, right? When you actually break it down from like a child safety, like, kind of approach, like, this is a pretty like messed up thing, right? And so they're sitting there with like kids from probably, and they would do it age specific, so maybe it's like 14 through kind of 18 bracket, then maybe slightly older, and they're basically saying who sinned, who screwed up, who disappointed God, who thought about a sister in Christ the wrong way, or who watched something inappropriate, or who looked at porn or whatever. And then we would like basically either tell the truth or lie, because basically, at least in all the youth groups I've ever been a part of, all the guys were at some point screwing up, because screwing up was such a low entry, right? So even if you just like looked at a girl you liked in youth group and like thought about, oh God, I like those knees, or whatever you're into, if you're one of those freaks that like likes boobs or something, but that was enough for you to be like, yeah, I screwed up. I definitely screwed up this week. And then we would literally like, it was very shameful. It was very, and the alternative was you to go, oh no, I'm doing really well. Actually, it's been 4 weeks since I last looked at knees online. And everyone go, oh, well done, Phil. You hang in there. You're one of the good guys. But it was so linked of like your worth and your like, if you do well, you're great. And if you don't do well, you kind of screwed up. And like you're saying, Neil, yeah, there's a lot of like, oh, well, you're a lad, boys will be boys, pray the prayer, you'll be fine. Like there was very much that kind of dynamic thrown in the mix, but you can't help but just accumulate year in, year out. I mean, day in, day out, a whole lot of shit. Like, just a lot of shame and guilt and all sorts of stuff that you start associating with that.
Like the way you look at women in general as well. If you're constantly feeling shame every time you think, wow, she's really pretty, and thinking, well, me thinking her pretty, is that lustful? And like you're a teenager, your hormones are raging, your body's going through so much change. I mean, that's definitely going to have a knock-on effect as you become or move into adulthood. And how you view women and the way you view women will then filter into how you treat women.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a big problem.
I think it took me to about 24, 25 to realize that basically women were objects and sexual objects at that to me, like for the most part. And the church had done that to me just by constantly hammering into me that any thought, any observation of if I just even noticed a girl, like I'm like, oh gosh, I'm terrible, I'm evil, I'm sinful. But what it was doing was teaching me that that's my nature, that's who I am, and I'm trying to fight that. And what should have been happening is just teaching a healthy dynamic of like, well, of course you find people attractive. Whatever your sexuality, you're going to find some people on this planet attractive, unless you're kind of like completely asexual. And that's normal. That's not evil. That's not bad. Now, if you then, abduct them and rape them, okay, not good, right? Even if you've got like a lower tier, maybe you have sex with them before marriage. Okay, well, that can be not good, right? And so we have like all these like barriers of what we deem okay, and different people will have a different barrier. But the churches is so low that as a teenager, almost any thought you have of a female is going to on some level be filtered in. And it literally taught me to even look at women that I didn't find attractive and observe. The first thing I would observe about a woman was like, oh, you're not attractive. I wouldn't even notice like, oh, you're a nice person, or, like, and I'm just like, that really screwed me out. It took, even after noticing it 24, 25 years old, took me a few years of really intentionally working on that to kind of break that down. And it was because I had some really close female friends that like, that broke through for me, like that component. But it's still probably in there somewhere. I'm sure I objectify women on some levels, but I think there's no doubt it affects men. I think we'd be really lying to ourselves to say this doesn't have a negative.
Oh, it absolutely does. I'm just curious. I was just curious as to the way that you guys were presented with this purity culture. And from what you're saying, it's just really interesting because it feels like they are reinforcing what they are trying to avoid. Mm-hmm. So you're then automatically overanalyzing every encounter with the opposite sex, which happens all the time, day in and day out, which then makes your mind constantly on like, well, was that encounter appropriate? Was I lusting? And then you go straight to sex, and it's just this vicious cycle that constantly, and like you said, women become an object, but also then you're constantly thinking about sex. So they're like, well, at least for us girls, like, well, boys, they're more physical and they're obsessed with sex. And you're like, well, yeah, because you're just reinforcing it from what you're telling me. So it's like, well, wait a minute. If we approach this differently, then there wouldn't necessarily be this need for constant pushing of this purity culture.
Yeah. And it's weird to me as well, that even that component that's so driven in, I think the church is so obsessed with these kind of feminine masculine divides, and we've somehow established masculinity is like we're just driven by sex. We're just a penis with legs and an arm. Just one arm, not two. I don't know why I said arm. With arms and legs, you know. And then women are just there, and they, you know, they don't really want to have sex that much, but they'll just give, you know, that's their duty as a wife. And the thing is, that's so incorrect. Just technically, from a very factual point of view, in relationships across the world, 40% of those relationships, the female have a higher libido than the men. So they want sex more than the men. So yeah, men want sex more often than women, but not by that much. It's almost 50-50 actually. It's 60-40. You know, that's not that different. And so then what happens is then you get a whole, and I deal with this a lot when I'm talking to people. So I have loads of guys that message me who have come up in the church and in Christianity, and they feel like shit because they don't want to have sex as much as their wife. And they're like, what's wrong with me? Am I evil? Am I screwed up or whatever? And vice versa. How many women feel like totally, if you've been taught, oh, you're getting married to this person who's kept himself pure his whole like life for you or whatever, and hopefully he's not looked at too many knees online and things like that, but like on the whole he's pure, and then suddenly he gets to have sex with you, and God, he's going to want to have sex nonstop. And even the women leaders are saying to you as you're growing up now, listen, you might not want to have sex as much as your husband, but that's your duty, you know, your bodies belong to each other. All this kind of weird promoting rape inside marriages culture, all that stuff. But that does something in your head when you then get married and you find out you actually want to have sex more than your husband, and you go, oh, am I not desirable? Does he not like me? Does he not care about me? And it's probably none of those things. It's just like, oh, he gets horny a little less often than me. And so like, we're just not doing anyone favors because we're teaching such really incorrect and harmful stuff about sex in this weird need to try and make men more manly and women more womanly, when we actually have no idea what the hell those things mean, apparently, it would seem. And so it's just really interesting. So like from your perspective growing up, because I mean, you have quite a unique upbringing anyway, because I can't imagine Americans in Europe having to deal with the concepts of sex, nudity. I mean, like things like you click on the TV in Europe and it's like their shower gel commercials crack me up, right? Because it's like in Europe, it's like, oh, there's a naked woman or man just like scrubbing, well, usually if it's a woman, boobs, probably not in men as much, but like, you know, scrubbing her boobs with shower gel, and it's like, ooh, buy Radox shower gel, and I'm like, I'm watching a woman scrubbing her boobs with lathering them up, and I'm like, what's happening right now? Because in the UK and America, not going to happen. But they're like, well, why are we watching women in bikinis shower? Like, what? That's weirder, right? But I can't imagine American Christians coping well with that, is I guess my point, or like how you instill like, well, did you look at any knees? There's knees everywhere on the TV.
That's pretty much like, so there's, I mean, there's multiple instances, and I could reference anything with regards to like my teenage years, but the one particularly funny one was, the town that we lived in and that the church was in, like you get like advertisement, like posters all over the place or whatever, like the kind that you get on bus stops and stuff.
Right.
There's one time where one of the adverts, and it must have been for soap, but basically it was like a giant bowl, and then it was like suds that made like the shape of like a triangle or whatever, and then it was like a woman's face sticking out, and then her two boobs. That was the advert.
What was it selling?
I think it was soap, because I think the stuff, like it was like suds or something, and it probably had like a bottle of soap down in the corner or whatever, but it was like her face and two boobs sticking out of the suds or whatever, and that was the essential advert or whatever.
This guy's just like selling TVs, but he like read an entry-level marketing book that was like, now step one, sex sells. If you can, sexualize the advert. And he's like, all right, close the book. I'm selling a TV, Bob. Watch. Boobs.
So I remember every time we would drive past it, my mom would be like, look the other way, look the other way.
Which you guys have a kid, right? If you're like, oh, Rachel, look over there, don't look to the left. Where's she looking? She's like, what the hell's on the left, right? I mean,
it's just, but I imagine other kids must have had very similar situations where it was like, I remember also, we lived in a flat, and on the side of the building that we lived in was like a big advertisement board. And I remember once it was an advert for pants, and it was literally like the bottom half of the torso and like the like pants and the legs, and the woman was on her side in this like thing, but that's all you could see. And I remember my parents being like, oh, this is on the side of our building, like
your brother was sitting there, yeah.
So like, because we'd have to see it when we drove up and parked and stuff. It was just funny, like
it's just a woman wearing pants.
Yeah, just like you couldn't even see like her boobs or her face or anything. It was just the lower half of her body lying sideways, advertising.
Was there knees and belly button? Because that is
there was a belly button and some knees, so maybe that was it.
Christians were sorted.
Well, like it's just a really weird thing because like you said, like Europe is really chill about that kind of thing. Like, especially like in France. Like I remember we had a my dad did a lot of stuff with Students for Christ, which were university students. We went to the south of France for a conference, and we went out for like a walk, and some lady was down by the river, like sunbathing topless. And that was like, oh my goodness, walk to the other side of the bridge so we can't see it type thing. But like, it's totally chill and normal. Nobody bats an eye. And so like, yeah, it's just this really weird, like a lot of people say, why, like, how come you have such an American accent for having lived in Europe for so long? And I have to put it down to the amount of time spent within American culture and around American people in church.
All the Europeans were just running around naked, and you were just like, I can't go outside.
We're all like, oh my goodness. Yeah. But yeah, like, it's just really interesting because it was very much like American culture very much influenced a lot of what was going on in that church. That's not to say that like people within the church had their cultures necessarily suppressed. I can't speak for that because obviously like my experience is based on my culture, and I have a culture within me. I would have to let someone else speak for that. And they did, because it was based on like a church that was founded and run by missionaries, a lot of whom had been abroad to other countries on other continents as well. They often, like once a year, they would do like an international banquet where they would have people within the church bring food from their own countries. So you would get to taste lots of different tastes from lots of different areas of the world and stuff. So there was an element of like celebrating culture, but the underlining, because it was an American church, there is an underlining American culture that is always present.
So fascinating.
Okay.
That makes me think of, so when probably not one of the first times, but I'd been going to Europe for a little while, and I was in Switzerland with two of my favorite people in the world, Walter and Nicole Ellis, are such legends. They were missionaries there from South Africa, and South Africa is very Puritan as well. It's quite American, quite UK, like probably much more than the UK actually. They're anti-drinking, they're very like puritanical with sex and stuff like that as well. So they had like come out of that kind of culture. And one day we were talking about this kind of component of sex in the church and how weird it is and how much we focus on it. And Walter was like, have you been to a sauna on the continent? Have you been? Like, yeah. And I was like, no. And he's like, it's crazy. He's like, just like everyone's naked. And I'm like, really? You were just naked with a bunch of dudes? And he's like, no, you're naked with a bunch of dudes and women. And I'm like, what? And he's like, I know. And he's like, to be honest with you, he's like, it's an amazing experience. And I was like, now Neil knows me, I'm a bit of an exhibitionist anyway. There's a famous photo of me sitting naked in his room. Yeah. Actually, awkwardly enough, I actually think watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer with him.
More unlikely. But there was the reason you stayed in that chair for quite a while.
People are going to get ideas. Anyway, quickly moving on. But like, I was always pretty chill about being naked, about I've never had too much of a hang up on that per se. Now I probably would get really awkward being naked around people that I didn't know or whatever. And I wasn't like, I would like walk into like people's rooms in our house, like going, I'm naked. Like I didn't really think about it, but it just wasn't a big issue. So I was like, that could be kind of interesting. And he's like, we should do it. Like, so we took we had a morning and afternoon off. So we took like a big chunk, and he's like, we'll go to the sauna. We'll like go to all these different rooms. They're really cool. It's great. And it was an amazing experience. But the whole time going into this experience, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be naked. Now I have no problem being naked at all. But I'm like, if there's any pretty girls in there, I'm going to have a massive erection. Right? I'm like, that's my first thought is like, oh my God, this is going to be the worst. Like, how on earth? Like, because but it's that Christian thing of like, I can't see a woman without objectifying her and seeing her as a lustful object and so on and so forth. And actually, this is probably some of the really helpful work. It was actually really healing for me because it was quite early on in that process. I was probably about 27, 26. So it's probably around the time I'd been aware of this for a few years and I was wanting to work on it. And I was like, let's do it. And I went, and I remember there were multiple women there that were beautiful. There was plenty of people there that were not beautiful, like me, right? I'm sure no one saw me and was like, oh no, I might get an erection, right? So that wasn't an issue. But there were other people that I'm like, wow, these people are beautiful. But it was such a weird thing. And I was just like, this is just not sexual at all. Do you know what I mean? It's not a sexual thing. And I'm looking, and I'm aware they're beautiful. Like I can see a woman go, wow, she's really beautiful. And then that was it. You just moved on. You're in a sauna, you're in a steamer, you're going, you're sitting, you're thinking, you're talking to your friends. Like it wasn't a thing. I wasn't going, oh, what if I look again? Or like, that just wasn't. And I was just like, God, like we have really screwed up that we can't, like there's a whole grouping of the world that can deal with this without an issue. And somehow we've created cultures where we cannot even see, boobs on a billboard or selling like suds or whatever, something like suds selling.
Yeah, it was really weird. I mean, it was a weird advert in itself. It
sounds like a weird advert. I'll give you. But again, like, why is a naked woman in an advert for shower gel weird? Like that's exactly what I'd expect if someone was showing me how shower gel works. It's like they sell like razors and they're like, let me show you a woman shaving her perfectly smooth leg, and it's like, you could have a hairy leg. That would be actually a better demonstration. It's like, why have we got these weird needs to have everything look a certain way or be a certain way? And I think that's it, isn't it? Like the church does this thing of like, we can't allow anyone to ever see anyone naked, and then suddenly nudity becomes this really taboo thing where it didn't have to be. It's like, it's just weird. It's crazy.
But then you get couples who then get married and then they have sex and they still feel dirty about it because they've been told their whole life, even though that it's in the church, they're doing okay now by church standards, they now feel dirty or wrong, or they don't enjoy it, or because you've been told for so long it's bad, whatever. So it's just,
and you can't talk about what you like, what you don't like, because it's just so awkward, right? And then I've had, so if you're a guy, right, and you're grown up as a teenager and you're masturbating like 12 times a day or whatever, you probably, once your testosterone levels drop and you start becoming a bit more normal, you probably don't masturbate as much, probably don't watch porn. But a lot of them have got hang-ups, addictions to porn, all sorts of different stuff that have been developed because people have been so obsessed with these things. And because they're not given any room to explore their sexuality in any other ways. So what happens is they've literally, every time they've orgasmed, multiple thousands of times probably at this point, by the time they get married, every time they've had an orgasm, the immediate thought after they've orgasmed is, I'm terrible, I'm worthless, how stupid of me, God hates me, oh God, I'm gonna have to try and like repent and work my way back close to God. And then we're supposed to not think like that the second they're married. And so what happens is people that are married, there's a whole bunch of guys that after they have sex, as soon as they like basically orgasm, they like are there with their wife and they're supposed to be enjoying themselves and having a good time together, and they're like sitting there thinking, oh, I feel guilt and I feel shame, and it's like, why am I feeling all this stuff? And it's like, well, you spent 10 years ingraining that like that response in you. It's really messed up. It's just such a weird component. So Jessie, what was like when you guys split up into your female group, right? We were all talking about, well, kids, tell me how many times you masturbated this week, right? Really weird, inappropriate, kind of messed up conversation. Oh, can I tell you one story? So one time we decided, we'd always kind of brainstorm new ways to not masturbate, right? I mean, I don't know any Christians that don't have new ideas and strategies and whatever. Like, it was crazy. And this is in a culture that wasn't that fixated on it, as far as I knew, compared to some of the stories I've heard. But one of the things that happened once, I remember, we broke into like accountability partners. And so we had like another person, which is funny, right? Because you're like, okay, now there's two of you. Both of you are addicted to porn, and you're supposed to stop each other watching porn. But what's interesting is you had to like text each other every day and be like, are you good? Like, did you watch porn? How are you doing? Or whatever. And it was whatever, that might be helpful, that might be a prompt, it might keep people accountable, whatever it is, but it's just a weird motivator, right? It's kind of like Big Brother's watching or whatever. But one time, one of the strategies we implemented was if you masturbated, the next time the person saw you, they could punch you in the balls. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
we got like abusive over it. Like, it was insane. Anyway, just remember that really random and crazy story.
So we did the same thing where they wanted to do that, but they had an app, and this must have been like early
What, to punch you in the balls?
So yeah, punch you. But like, it was like you can install an app on your internet browser where your history got taken to your accountability person. I think mine was I think mine was Justin's, and like we were like sitting there going, yeah, that sounds great, and we both never installed it and never mentioned it to each other. We were just like, yeah, that sounds really good, accountable. I mean, Justin's like nodding away to, might not be Justin, I think it was Justin.
Not that anybody else outside of the three of us.
No, nobody does that. If he listens to this, maybe
he'll laugh.
It might have been someone else. But we were like, yeah, we can do that. And then we were just like, we just never talked to each other about it because we're like, you know, fine well what we're doing, and we don't want the other person to know, like, okay, he really into his knees, like that's weird. Or like, okay.
I had a friend when I was at Bethel who was developing an app that basically did that. Basically, it was like a VPN, so virtual private network, and basically all your internet would go through this server. And the server, when you typed something in, it would go through it and then go to Google or go to like whatever website and then come back and give you the website. So that's like
kind of a way better system than what they were.
But so if the server opted and was like, "Whoa, you can't go on that, man. We know what you're like with knees or whatever, right? You can't go to knees.com."
In that voice, that would totally work for me. Oh, what you doing there, pal?
It just says it really loud, and everyone in the coffee shop is like, "What's this guy looking at?" But like it internally, I've anthropomorphized this server. It probably didn't think. I've been started watching Channel 4's Humans. I never watched it when it first came out. It's so freaking good.
I heard it's good. Yeah.
You should watch it. So I'm anthropomorphizing machines, I think. But anyway, so it would go, oh no, that's a bad way. So you type in like Pornhub.com or something. And it's like, Phil, no. And so it wouldn't work. But say you were doing like a research project for a university on knees, and you're a doctor, you kind of need to get to knees.com or whatever, or WebMD/knees, or I don't know. Please, no one go to any of these websites. These could be creepy. I'm just going to call this episode Knees. And basically,
that we grown up are massive. We've literally just talked about masturbation the entire time.
Yeah,
that's true.
The subject after.
So if Dad does listen to this, he's gonna be questioning everything he ever did with us. He's like, "Oh man, there's knees somewhere."
I respected Phil, and then he did that episode with his brother and his sister.
I thought they were playing computer games all day.
Sorry, Phil.
So basically, the computer program, if it would say no, you don't get to do that. But like, say you were doing like a research project or something like that, you'd have to get it to work. Obviously, you need to get to that website. So it was like this fail safe, and you could basically say, "No, I really need to get to it." And so what would happen is it would automatically message someone in your list. I think it would message like all 3 people in your list, and so they could approve it. So basically, email your mom or your pastor or your best friend or whatever you had, and it would say, "Phil's trying to get to like WebMD/knees. Do you think that's okay?" And like they would basically say yes or no. And it was just like it's crazy. It's a great system in some ways, and I think like someone then went on and made that, and it's a big deal. There's an app that does this now, and it's a subscription model, and Christians spend millions paying for this kind of thing, this accountability.
I guess you're like a sex addict that's trying to like recover.
Could be really helpful. I
mean, I guess, but like, yeah, I think there's way too much room for that to be.
You could circumvent it, I'm sure. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's a wild world of like everyone trying to keep each other accountable, and you would like, but like, it's a weird dynamic, right? Because like, yeah, I don't know. It's so driven by fear. Anyway, again, stop, pause. Jessie, tell us what happened when we went to your.
It was definitely not how many of you guys sinned this week kind of vibe, okay. But very much focused on don't make men stumble. or don't make boys talk.
Listen, girls, cover your knees. The Drysdales are out there.
Is that what happened the first time we met? You saw my knees and thought, that's it.
That's the one for me.
But yeah, it was very much an emphasis on what there. I mean, it was more of like men are physical, women are emotional. So there was less of an emphasis on, like, obviously things like, oh, porn's bad, don't masturbate, like things like that. That was all, sex is bad until you're married type thing.
Did you ever have like friends like confide in you? Oh, I've actually seen some porn or I do masturbate. Was that a culture like people talked about that though? Among the girls? I
mean, yeah, within the girls, like you would have that rebellious friend, the one that broke the rules.
Right.
And you all secretly were like, I wish I had the freedom. But
so not that they were like terribly guilty about it and they're like, I need help, I'm addicted. It was more like, see you guys.
There was the element of like I don't know, like there's like the forbidden, I guess, like she has had the forbidden fruit, she seems fine type thing, like
smited yet.
Yeah, she's not been hit by lightning or anything. So like there, and then also like you're incredibly curious as well, so you've got that one friend that's all of a sudden being like, I this, that, or the other, and you're like, whoa, okay. So you want to know more in that respect. But I think the emphasis more with the girls was like, you don't like, because so it was the early 2000s. I finished high school in 2007, so that gives you an idea of like where my teens were. So like, let's talk about fashion. Low-rise jeans, belly shirts, which I guess they weren't quite the crop tops that we see today, but like we're talking about like shorter shirts or whatever.
There's button happening, right?
There is button, there is definitely, and then like embellished pockets on the back of your jeans, which was a big thing because embellished pockets draw the boys' attention to your bum, and that causes them to think lustful thoughts. And they will therefore sin.
What was an embellished pocket?
Like with like stitching
on
like,
really?
Rhinestones, whatever was cool at the time. Words, juicy, that was juicy couture. Was
I remember that,
actually,
that was sinful.
That's a fashion sin for sure, but
I mean, I remember leaving the house and my mom being like, can you just put your arms up? And if I put my arms up and my belly showed, like that's not an okay t-shirt to wear.
Someone just taught me the other day about the fingertip rule, which is like if you have your arms straight down, your skirt has to be below where your fingertip is. I was like, dang, that's crazy.
Yeah, the circumvent
depends how long your arms are. People have really long arms.
Yeah. People with short arms were like,
I mean, Christian girls wore miniskirt and circumvented the purity thing by wearing those cropped leggings that were right below the knee, because then you could wear your mini, but you were like modest because you had the leggings. So like you wanted to be with the trend of the time, you wanted to wear the trendy things, but there was a lot of rules around what you were allowed to wear because what you wore would cause a boy or a man to sin.
Did they shame you about why you wanted to wear those things? Because I feel like those things were then hypersexualized. So it was like, oh, girls only wear that so they can lure in boys. So then was this thing of like, why do I want to wear those kind of things? Or was that like a thing?
I don't remember that specifically. Okay. I just remember it being drummed in of like, don't wear this, you can't wear that, this, that, or the other. And that with that came a sense of like, I guess, shame. And there was an element of if you did wear that, you were looking for the wrong attention, I guess. It does have those connotations because you've been told that these things are immodest, and immodesty is impurity, and impurity is sin. And therefore, if you are wearing these things and you want to wear these things, then you are obviously impure and sinning. So like there's unspoken connotations to that. But yeah, I think the onus was definitely more on your responsibility is not to cause men to sin, because you're not as physically sexual as a man is. You're more emotional, and therefore you may not consider these things, and you need to consider these things. It's your responsibility to consider these things, which is awful. And that feeds into the whole, she was raped. Well, what was she wearing?
Yeah.
She was harassed. Well, what was she wearing? she obviously was looking for it because she was wearing this. That feeds into that narrative that is still prevalent today, because a whole generation and possibly more of people have been told that what a woman wears, she bears the responsibility for what happens to her because she caused a man to want her in an inappropriate way.
I'm reading a book right now, and this woman was, and what is it? It's Linda K. Klein's book, Pure, which is really great. It's about sexual purity, culture kind of thing. And she interviewed, it's a very famous case in America, this woman who was basically raped by 2 football players, and nothing really came of it because they were 2 football players and she was a girl. But when she went home and finally felt strong enough and brave enough to tell her parents, her dad was a pastor. And the first thing her dad said was, "What were you wearing?" Mm-hmm. And you're just like, do you know, so it just highlights how ingrained that can be, that even a father to his daughter is still going, well, really, if you were raped, you must have done something wrong. Let's work through the things you could have done wrong before I will even think that these guys are at some fault. You know, like, unbelievable. And it just shows, like, like this, like, I can't even imagine what that does to you, like when your own father, and reading her, how that fucked her up, right? I mean, that response was, she talks about that response being almost as bad as the actual, the thing, which, I mean, I can't conceptualize either, you know, component, but anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's just like, it's not an uncommon thing. I think it's really prevalent that we put the responsibility of men's horrific action upon women. We do that culturally anyway at the best of times, never mind this hypersexualized Christian culture.
I mean, it's interesting because it's like you have a trend of women sharing the outfits that they wore when they were raped. And like one woman was wearing an oversized sweatshirt while she was running. Like this idea of modesty, it's like, well, wait a minute, like what are we talking about here? Because it doesn't matter at the end of the day what a woman is wearing. It doesn't, because, you know, you have plenty of women that are wearing things that would technically by the church be considered modest, and yet these things are still happening to them. Yeah. So it's a moot point.
Yeah. Well, you look in the Middle East and in like heavily Islamic countries where women are very covered up. You couldn't say they aren't being modest, and rape is still a prevalent thing. Obviously, even less so a reported thing, because a woman's witness to that isn't as valid as a man's witness, and things, all sorts of terrible things involved there. But
I think the only way to really change that, and I think, I mean, we have a daughter, so like this is obviously something that she's really young. I don't try and think about it too much, but it will be something that we'll have to have a conversation about one day. I don't want to put her through purity culture because that's traumatizing and it's not helpful, but she will need to be aware of the fact that she lives in a world with what we would call rape culture. Yeah. She'll need to be careful. She will need to know that, you know, those things happen, and how does she protect herself from that? It's okay to be confident in yourself, and I would love for you to be able to wear what you want to wear and express yourself how you want to express yourself, but at the same time, that's not the world that we live in, and it's just it's like constricting in some ways. But then if we had a son, it would also be very important for us to emphasize respect. Big one. Just really important for us to emphasize respect. And again, purity culture would be far away from our minds in that situation as well, because it's just as detrimental to boys as it is to girls.
Yeah. From my conversation with women, I feel like women have experienced a lot more talks about how to avoid being raped than men ever experience a talk about how not to rape someone, right? I mean, I don't remember ever really being taught, hey, respect women, you don't just have sex with them if you want them. I don't remember anyone telling me that. Now, thankfully, it's not something I particularly would do. Somehow other values have sifted in where that's how I see women anyway. Like, even though I was very hypersexualized and you taught to see women as quite objects and stuff like that, it was still I guess such a Christian background, you couldn't possibly have ever done that. But then, I don't know, I mean, like, you look at all the stuff that's happening in the evangelical church and other movements in the church, and plenty of people do, right? I mean, you look at all these evangelical leaders that are falling because of their crazy, manipulations and rapes and sexual abuses. And so, I mean, I think being in that system, we often go, oh, that will protect you on some level, maybe to some degree. But I think on some level, you have to have a moral compass anyway. And people that are egotistical, narcissistic kind of people will not be held back by that. But yeah, I think in my experience, I don't know many men that are just taught the fundamentals of that, of like, hey, it doesn't matter what a woman's wearing. You are responsible for like getting consent, engaging with someone as a human being, like, really basic stuff that I think is becoming, certainly in the UK, I don't know about other places in the world, certainly I don't know about America or anything, but it's becoming more of a common thing in our sex education, in our education system as a whole. We're becoming a bit more progressive and a bit more healthy. I don't know if we can hope too much for a progressive sex education within America, hopefully, but who knows?
I will tell, I suppose.
Yeah. No, it's a messy world. But yeah, that's yeah, it's interesting that was kind of like a focus, because it's just such a messy thing that you're teaching young girls in their teens, look, you're responsible for how men are looking at you. Men are sex crazed maniacs, and they're gonna be just unstoppable sexual sin if you show your belly button when you lift your hands, or I mean, it's just like, what kind of like, yeah, I mean, how did that affect how you saw men? Do you think it did affect how you saw men, or do you think you kind of were like, whatever, mom, or whatever? I don't know.
Well, I definitely never had that kind of conversation with my parents. All very much like
youth group stuff.
Yeah. But I would say, like, your impression of men is that they were sexual beings, and they couldn't necessarily control themselves, and they needed your assistance in that matter.
No, they don't need your assistance.
Well, the assistance in controlling themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I guess, like, you learn to be a little more cautious, perhaps. But then also, like, it's just really it teaches you to kind of be ashamed of your own body, especially for women or for girls who maybe are curvier or develop a lot faster, because curves make men stumble. And you just feel a bit more like ashamed. Like, it's funny because it's a contradiction to what you have around you. So, like, you're in your teens and your body's changing, and the world tells you, like, celebrate your curves. You want to have the bigger boobs. You want to have certain aspects of your body. But then on the other hand, you're being told that that's bad. You need to hide it away. You need to cover up. And I've even had once where I was wearing a t-shirt that was like up to your, but it was like, it's a t-shirt. It wasn't particularly loose. Again, naughties, everything was particularly tight. And I remember someone saying that wasn't an appropriate t-shirt because it showed off my curves too much. I'm like, well, this is what I've got. What do you want me to do with it?
I'm sorry, let me take it off.
It's more like, this is my body. What do you want me to do? And so you go home and you think, oh, maybe I was like made wrong because I was given boobs. Like, it's very it's very confusing.
Yeah,
that's the thing. And when you're in a world where women are being told they need to look a certain way, then have someone told, well, the way you look is not okay. It's just really confusing when you're going through all those changes as a teenager. And I do wonder if a lot of girls who suffer from eating disorders or body dysmorphia, those issues are not compounded by what they're being told through these aspects of purity culture.
It's really interesting, isn't it? And very, very sad. It intrigues me as well, because there's a component within, like, in Christianity, to be single is to be less than. And like I shared some stats on that on like my Instagram a week or two ago, where it was like they asked evangelicals, do you consider someone that is single to be inferior or less, to have less value than someone that is married? And they asked group of men, I don't know how many, and they said, like, do you think someone that's single is less valuable than someone that's married? And they were like, yeah, but 75% of them said yeah. And you're like, whoa. And then they asked women, do you think someone that's single is less valuable than someone that's married? And 97% said yes. So it just shows in evangelical Christianity, so I don't know if all Christianity is the same, but in that world, certainly women are picking up a message that says, if you're single, you are less valuable than someone that's married. And that makes sense because women maybe aren't able to be as vocal, they aren't able to lead. Maybe once they're married, they have a little bit more freedom or whatever. But even the men are going, 3 out of 4 men are going, single people are less valuable. That's what we are perceiving. And what's fascinating about that is when you look at the single people in church, for every one single male, there's 2 single, just punch my mic, there's 2 single women. And so what's fascinating about this dynamic is you are hammering into women, don't become something that men are drawn to. You need to try and be less desirable, less this, less that. Now, obviously, just how you look isn't the only thing that men notice. I'm not wanting to play into the Christian idea that men are just running around looking for someone pretty, but there's a component of like, we're teaching such contradictory messages. Do you know what I mean? It's like this thing of like, you need to be with someone. Well, there's less men out there than possible. So I need to like, maybe get out there. I need to put myself out there and try and find a guy because there's only so many guys and there's a lot more girls than guys. So it's kind of a dog eat dog world on some level, which no one tends to actually acknowledge, but that's kind of a true dynamic in the church. That a lot of girls, especially once they get to 40 and they're still single, will kind of be like, yeah, it was a mess. Like it was really messy, that kind of thing. And yet we're also teaching girls, okay, well, like, don't wear makeup, don't, put yourself out there, don't wear this type of clothing or that type, don't flirt, don't try and be sexy, don't touch a guy, playfully, like all these things that like are just general kind of components of meeting someone and connecting with someone, seeing if there's some sort of spark. And yet we're saying when we teach you not to do any of those things, you're less than someone that has done those things and got married. It's such a conflicting kind of component. I think we just really mess with women's heads. I mean, we mess with everyone's heads in this kind of culture, but
well, if you look at the way the church is set up as well, it's geared towards kids, teens, married couples, families. And single people tend to be like, oh, should probably do something for the single people.
Yeah. Have a singles group once a month.
Young adults, young professionals, whatever you want to call them. It's kind of like, ooh, students also tend to be catered for, like university students. But then again, they usually tend to be like, you've just moved out of your teens, you're now a university student, you're probably going to be getting married type thing. And that in-between gap where they may have graduated from university, they're not married, they don't have kids. There's always like, every single church I've been in seems to have this, like, what do we do with the single people? And it's like, they're still people.
Yeah.
They still matter just because they're not married. And, it's interesting that you talk about that because I shared your post on Instagram, and like, I don't have a huge following. I don't have a lot of people that comment on my stuff. But the amount of responses that I had from friends, so I'd be like, oh, wow. Like, and these are women that some of them are still single now, where this really resonated with them. And it's an issue that was like, we did feel less valued. We did feel like we didn't matter as much when we were like, or we still don't feel like we matter as much in church because we're single.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question. Like, I mean, even churches that are quite progressive, or whatever the right word is, that would allow women in leadership and a woman pastor or whatever, generally speaking, 9 times out of 10, those women are going to be married to a guy. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And even then, in that group, I would say 9 times out of 10, the guy is somehow involved in leadership as well. you know what I mean? It's very rare you're going to have a woman that's like the leader of a church and the guy's like, oh, I'm an accountant, right? The church I was a part of here in Manchester was founded by actually a woman pastor, and her husband was like, I actually am an accountant. I'm not interested in doing it. You know, he loved the church and was really passionate and involved, but he wasn't interested in doing kind of like a lot of that. And I was like, wow, that is rare, like really rare. And so it's doable and it's possible, but like, it's just not likely. Now, if she wasn't married at all, would it happen? You know, like once you start peeling back these components of like, oh, a man who's alongside with you. I know Neil and Jess, of course, actually, you were both a part of this church at the same time as I think I was. We were part of a movement, a church that the movement as a whole only allows couples to serve as the leaders. Now, it would probably allow a single male, but the point is that they kind of want females involved, but then when they like get together for leaders meetings, it's just the men and things like that. You know, it's like this is kind of a weird, like we step around it and we tiptoe around it all the time as Christians. But at the end of the day, it's a man's playground, and as a woman, you are much less than a man. And then as a single woman, you're basically nothing. You're maybe on creche, but that's it. Like you just don't have a position in the vast majority of churches. And like to be doing that, I mean, I talk to people that like, you know, they're like, oh, I'd love to help out and run some ministries and stuff. And oh, sorry, you're a single woman, you're not covered, you're not whatever you are. And I'm like, these women are like, you know, have like doctorates in clinical psychology, or, you know, they run businesses and things like that. And it's like, well, you know, you're just an emotional woman, or, you know, it's like they're 10 times more qualified than like the lead pastor, or, you know, like, it's just such a weird thing.
It's like single women have to have 4 times the amount of capabilities, accreditations, degrees, or whatever to even get maybe a side glance for certain positions. And even then, a lot of times it's like, ooh, but she doesn't have a husband that she submits to.
Mm-hmm. I remember the church you're talking about, we led it. I don't think you're at the church at the time, but we led a life group. And I wasn't interested in actually leading a life group or preaching or teaching or whatever. I like to welcome people in and say, how you doing? I'll meet up with them during the week and be a friend or whatever. But Jessie's one is actually quite good at studying and saying something from the study or whatever. But there's definitely a thing of like, I was the head of it, even though I was like in the background.
Yeah.
But to the leaders, I was the head. And I was like, okay, I'll just say I'm the head so Jessie can do her thing. I remember at one point, Jessie said, one of the people who was there was with, I can't remember. So you basically said, we're talking on this passage, the main thing of this passage is this, but we don't want to talk about that. I want to lead us to something else or something. And then he just cut her off. This other gentleman in his 40s, 50s, a bit older than us or whatever, studying a PhD. So quite, like he knew what he was talking about, but he just, or whatever. So and Jessie, I can't believe, like you got a bit upset with it, but then, so trying to, I think Jessie like told him like, I didn't like the fact you took over my meeting. And like every time I tried to keep it to my thing, you were like, I told you we didn't want to do this, but you kept going it in. Somewhat, not in a nasty way, but you're like, can you let me lead or whatever? You're trying to plan probably, or what's it called? Mansplain or whatever. But I had to go speak to him, and he wanted to speak to me about it. As the leader, I was like, the issue's not with me. I'm annoyed at you because of the way you treat Jessie, but you need to speak to Jessie and sort this out because the issue's between you two. But there's that culture of, oh, I have to speak to the husband, I can't speak to the wife because that's wrong to speak to the woman.
Let me speak to the owner.
Essentially is what it is, isn't it? But like this happens in all the church things, like, oh, I've got an issue with Barbara, but I can't just go up and speak to Barbara. I better go speak to Sam because Sam is, you know, it's just crazy.
Well, if you and Barbara go into a room together, you might end up having sex or something anyway.
She's gonna have like a crop top and knees and everything.
Yeah, get her knees out and then
she'll mention Buffy and I'll be away. I'll be like, but like, yeah, it's just. That church was just crazy, but yeah, it was interesting. It's interesting. Like I just didn't want to. Not that I wasn't at that time interested in learning, but I was like, I'm not a preacher.
Yeah,
I wanted to communicate.
What I wanted from it wasn't what you wanted to do. It's not where your talents lie.
And then they wanted me to lead the meeting sometimes. And I was like, I don't really want to do this. I feel pressured into doing it. But because I don't think, did you ever get a go doing it? You probably wanted to do it though, at the time. But, or like, I didn't see a single woman lead a meeting.
I think it's interesting.
Especially not a single woman.
I think it's interesting as well, because our marriage in itself.
I'm the traditional housewife.
Yeah. Well,
So,
quite literally, right? You stay at home with your daughter.
Yeah.
But when I married Jessie, I said, I don't want to marry somebody who's going to do what I say. I want to marry somebody who's going to fight me and have her own decisions and have her own day. And we come at this.
You kind of knew what you were getting as well.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm looking for in a way. So I didn't want to, marry a child or like,
Yeah.
It's just a weird thing, isn't it? I think it's a weird concept. Like loads of guys in Christian societies have that. But it's a weird thing to be like, I'm the boss. Like maybe your wife has opinions and like maybe she knows better about certain subjects. And
a lot of this like women submit to your husbands thing is like you're allowed to have an opinion, but your husband makes the final decision.
Which is control, isn't it? Really?
And like the thing is like I know successful marriages where the couple are very, very happy together and the woman is happy to submit to the husband. That's totally fine. There's space for that. There's room for that. If that is a healthy relationship and they're happy together, more power.
Who are you to judge someone else?
We cannot claim to be the most knowledgeable people when it comes to marriage. We've been married for 8 years. That's nothing compared to some people.
However, we're probably beating the average at church. What's the average? You're not autistic. What's the average for divorce?
Maybe let's not go down that path.
No, there's a competition, but
I think for us, what works, like I'm an opinionated person. I am like, and it's hard because you spend your whole life being told like rein that in. It's not delicate. It's not ladylike. But it's like the fact of the matter is, I like to be informed and I like to have an opinion on, especially things that affect me. Now, what's worked out really nicely for us in our relationship is that we're both opinionated. We both can be very stubborn. But when it comes to important decisions to be made that really matter, we will work it out until we both come to an agreed mutual decision.
Sure.
And we also knew going into marriage, especially with kids potentially being on the table down the line, was that I have the higher income out of the two of us. Childcare is expensive. The likelihood was that he would be staying at home and I would be making the money. I would be the breadwinner. So it's when people find that out, it's still really interesting to see people be like, that doesn't sound very submitting. But the thing is, even with it, when I don't come home and go, well, I'm the breadwinner, I make the decisions. This is okay. Well, we have made a decision together that it makes more sense for me to be working because our income is higher. But at the end of the day, we're looking after our family unit.
Yeah.
I'm out for myself. He's not out for himself. We're looking after our daughter. Like, it just feels healthy for us. It feels healthy that we make these decisions together. And yeah, okay, we have arguments over things because sometimes we dig our heels in and we don't agree. But we will eventually come to a mutual decision. But there's never a point in time where I've gone, right, well, you're the head of the household. You make the final decision. Yeah. We decide. And like, being in this church previously, we were never, we learned to not be vocal about that necessarily because I was vocal about it once in a ladies like book club type thing. And I got significant pushback. Like, that's not the biblical way. And I was like, right, okay, not the right group to be addressing this. Despite the fact that okay, we were still young and we'd only been married like a few years. And I was like, I don't feel like we're like heading down the path of eventual divorce and destruction. But it's just really interesting that like, it was like, this is the way. Whereas for me, it's like what works for our marriage. Some people just aren't comfortable with that. Some women are like, look, you make the decisions. I don't care. Some men are like, okay, wife, make the decisions. I don't care. Like some people are just like that. There's a lot of different dynamics to marriage and to relationships and to put people in boxes that they don't feel comfortable in. He doesn't like standing in front of a group of people and speaking. but I might feel more comfortable with that.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that he needs to be forced into that box of going in front of a bunch of people and speaking.
Yeah.
It seems crazy.
Yeah.
But
How have you found that dynamic, Neil, like among kind of like Christian friends or within the church as well? Like obviously Jessie talks about like in a book club, like kind of talking about some of the dynamics and everyone going like, oh, that's not right. Like, how have you found kind of like your friends within, or not even maybe friends, just people in the church or whatever, like how have they responded to you? Oh, you're a stay-at-home dad? Oh, you quit your job and she's making the money? Or, you know, that kind of dynamic. Is that, because I imagine in the UK, I feel like Europe is definitely, generally speaking, more progressive than somewhere like America anyway. So like there's probably less of a resistance to it than a lot of people would face in America. And even in America, I think maybe it's becoming a bit more accepted, maybe. But once you go into the church, there's definitely more people that are a bit like weirded out by it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I don't know. People have not necessarily said something to my face, but I'm sure there's, people talk about it. But I think a lot of the older guys who are a bit more are probably like, oh, that's great. I missed a lot of time with my kids growing up because of work, or so there's kind of a bit of envy. But mostly it's a bit like, yeah, it's weird. Like your job is to provide for your family, and they don't understand that this is actually providing. So I could earn, a job making, I don't know, like 16K a year, and Jessie can stay at home, or Jessie can make, much more than that. I won't say how much you make or whatever, but like
16 and a half.
Yeah. Like 6-digit income. No, like, more than what I could make or whatever.
I'm in your will, right, guys?
It just makes logical sense to, financially get yourself a bit happy. And she likes working. Yeah. I've never really particularly liked working. I've done artistically jobs. I was a chef. I was a photographer,
You still are.
I still do photography, yeah, but I'm not the kind of person that, I'm going to do 9 to 5 today, and I find lots of joy out of it. Even in school, I enjoyed things from school, but I didn't enjoy school. I enjoyed the social aspect. I enjoyed,
stapling your tongue,
PE, art, yeah, as if whatever. So, but I think some people find it weird. I don't know.
I think as well.
I think people outside church love it. They're like you go to like these mums and toddlers group. They're never called parents. They're mums and toddlers, or And I just like, yeah, that sounds good for me. I'm a mum. So I picture, but I think like mums appreciate it, like, because their dads are never there, or
ironically, especially traditional, the kids love it.
Yeah, because the kids don't get any time with their dads.
Wow, there's a guy here.
And that's not to say that guys who do work don't love their kids.
Oh yeah, totally.
But they're the kind of traditional dad doesn't spend much time with their kids anyway. They come with their work tired and they go do more work or whatever.
Yeah. There's such pressure to provide and perform as well. Like a lot of the time it's like, oh, you're not providing enough, or you keep working harder and get promoted. And like, that's a meme, isn't it?
So,
it's real.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not like, I think people are a bit shocked as well. Like, oh, maybe he's a bit of a Nancy or something. I don't know, that's the PC term, but he's a bit of a, but I don't think it matters to me, but I can still talk to guys about football and sport and stuff. So they're a bit like, oh, he's like stays at home, but he knows like more masculine things or whatever.
Yeah, you don't fit in a box.
I guess I'm quite lucky. I don't care to a long
you're
point.
Really good at like
care, so I'm just like, this is great. I'm just like spending quality time with my kid, which I would not be able to spend. We've got a house now, where we're on my salary, we'd be another 5 or 6 years to get a house. We still be in a flat we don't like, and a terrible situation and that stuff. So yeah, to me, I'm quite logical in some things as well. So I'm like, it's not obviously life isn't all about money, but you're a bit stupid to take a pay cut just because you have to be provided. To me, that makes no logical sense, I've enjoyed it. It's great. I mean, I'm going a bit insane with this lockdown. I think, there's been no play groups on since April, and Rachel starts nursery in 2 weeks, and I'm jumping a joy to get some free time.
They're just slapping a mask on her and going, on you go, kiddo, get out of here.
He's like, woo.
I like, when I'm during the day, I'm like, oh God, I'm going to kill her. But like during nighttime, she sleeps like, oh, she's just the greatest thing. Like, look, it was such fun today. Not mine, like I almost killed her. I think
all parents do that.
Yeah, exactly. But I think Jessie probably gets a lot of, I don't know what the right word is, judgment from people as well. Oh, you must be a bad mom. You don't want to spend time with your kid, or so there's and Jessie kind of cares more than I do. I'm a bit laid out and chill, but Jessie probably cares a bit more about other people's. Maybe that's to do with church pastor kid or whatever. So she cares that people think, oh, you must be a terrible mom because not. I mean, at the moment she's working at home anyway, so she's doing everything while I sit on the toilet. So like, I'm just doing another poo. I'll be 2 hours. Look after Rachel while you doing your conference call. I've taken the bins out. I'll be back at 5 hours. So so I don't know. Like, it's definitely a more modern. It's coming. I've got a couple of friends who are stay-at-home dads as well, and we can chat and be like, "Oh, this is weird." And
yeah, it's becoming more common.
I kind of now know I now know how a woman feel when like you come home and you mutter something to them and they spend all day with a kid. They're tired. Like you get a different insight.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah, I think I was always up for it. Like
like
I was like, it sounds like fun. I'm quite good kids.
We also weren't like a lot of Christian couples, perhaps, where we were 3.5 years before we got married. Like we dated for 3.5 years, which by the time we finally got engaged, we were like, people in church were like, "Oh, finally!" It's like a long time coming.
You know how pressure people in church put you in dating to get married, and the first it must be so exhausting for them to do that for 3 years.
The first Sunday we were back in church after our honeymoon, was like, "So kids," we're like, "Whoa, calm down!" Literally just had sex for the first time. Like, calm down.
We use these things called condoms, like.
But yeah, like
Dad's like the one thing I told them to do.
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of like I don't know. It just, and I don't know. It's really weird if with my upbringing within purity culture, like the first boyfriend I had, obviously having been bashed over the head with "I kissed dating goodbye." Like when that relationship did not work out or end in marriage, I was like, oh my goodness, like, what do I do now? And I think that breakdown of relationship, that end of that relationship kind of was really good for me in the sense that I was like, okay, well, that obviously wasn't the answer. And that obviously wasn't true. I mean, it took me a little while to get to that point, but I think it just kind of was like, well, things that I've been taught in regards to relationship obviously aren't set in stone type thing. And I think by the time we met, I don't know, like, it's just really interesting. Like there's a mesh of personalities that meant that we seem to just be a little more chill. Even though the surroundings were like, even like when we were hanging out and not actually in a relationship yet, everyone was like, you guys should date. You should get together.
It actually put me off asking out for so long because I didn't want to be like, I didn't want them to think I was asking out because they were.
Sure. There's so much pressure around that stuff.
Which eventually I was like, that's stupid. I want to date her anyway. Like, I shouldn't care. But like, I was like, it's just like, oh gosh, but if I ask her out now, then,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you think, oh, he's only whatever. Yeah, it's a bit.
I think we just found that like after we did start hanging out and started dating, it was like we can do things to the beat of our own drum, and that's okay. People won't necessarily agree with that, so sometimes the beat of our own drum is really quiet and private, and sometimes we can be really vocal about it, and that's okay. Not for fear of other people. It's just that like sometimes people's drama that they try and impose on you is not worthwhile.
Yeah.
It's just, I think say do what works for you. As long as you have a healthy relationship and you're happy within your relationship or your marriage or whatever, like as long as it's healthy.
I think there's this shift in time, and I think it is happening, and it will continue to happen, and we'll get there eventually. But like, it is just, I'm constantly surprised. I mean, the church I was a part of here in Manchester is like, in so many ways, so progressive. I mean, I told you, like, it started to like, I don't even know, 30 plus years ago, and a woman planted this church. So it's very progressive in a lot of ways. Had lots of female leaders, and yet I was utterly shocked. One of the founders of the church, there right from the beginning. When I met Tilly, they were like, "Oh, what does she do?" And I'm like, "Oh, she's a teacher. And he's like, oh, she's not going to be one of those career women, is she? And I was like, what? I'm like, and do you know what's really funny? Guess what his wife had done? Teacher. Now, I think, I don't know, I guess she'd quit teaching while raising the kids. I don't know enough about the background, but I was just like, whoa. I'm like, I had you a lot further along in a kind of progressive values and things like that. But wow, interesting. That thing runs deep. There's something deep there where you need me, for some reason, you need me to be the money earner and the breadwinner and the provider and the whatever. And you need her, this person you haven't even met yet, to be someone that stays at home and looks after kids, which we don't have, right? You know, it's like there's a whole world that you need to be comfortable. And I'm like,
yeah.
And it's nothing to do with you. That's really weird.
Yeah.
And yet that's on some level, certainly for a lot of people's backgrounds growing up in church, that's their norm. That is the norm that they immediately walk into, right? It's like what you're saying, like you get back from honeymoon and people are like, oh, so when are you having kids? And it's like, oh, I thought I'd have value once I got married. I thought that was the thing. But it turns out that, yes, I have more value than single people, but guess what? I'm still less valuable than the person that has a kid now, right? And it's just like it's this constant tier of like, how can I gain your approval and fit into this community in the right way? And we've got these kind of categories that everyone has to fit in. It's just so messy.
Wait till you tell people you're not having kids or you're only having one kid.
It's weird. You tell that to your non-Christian friends and they're like, we get that. Like kids are hard, really hard. And then you tell the non-Christian, like, but how do you spread? Like, how do you spread the message? It's like,
we can't convince anyone outside to be saved. We
how
need
the
to
church
kids.
Bro? We count the babies as congregation.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh.
Yeah, it's weird, but I don't mind it. I liked it. I think it's I don't know. I've got some very, I don't know.
We have
I'm traditionally got some, what I would call traditionally feminine aspects of my life, which work out great for raising kids or whatever. So it makes sense to me. Again, it's just really weird. I don't know. I think it's hard. I'm sure there's people judging me in the church, but I don't care. So it's hard for me to notice it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You just are blind to it.
Yeah, I just don't like. But if I do notice it, I like to like
play up, go even more in.
Like
he feels most comfortable in other people's awkwardness.
Oh, I love it.
Like,
oh yeah.
He's like, oh, you want to feel awkward? Well, let me make that work for you. Or I'm like, stop making them uncomfortable. He's like, no, I want to make them feel more uncomfortable.
I'm like an online troll, but in real life.
No, you're not cruel. You're not cruel. But like, you know, someone comes and be like, oh, I hear your wife has a career. He's like, yes. Like, let me.
Wow.
I know where this is going. Yeah, it's just an interesting dynamic because it really goes against a lot of like the way church hierarchy even is set up, you know, like I guess sometimes maybe couples have more value because once they enter leadership, the woman automatically is counted in as additional volunteer.
Yeah. Well, when you are like hiring like a pastor or something, you get a free wife, right? I mean, generally speaking, they don't get a salary as well. And so
they do a lot of work.
It's like, oh, I get like 40 hours a week instead of 80 hours a week instead of 40, right? I mean, we joked about that before.
Yeah, if you think about it, like automatically people in the church look to the pastor's wife as a leader as well, regardless of whether she's, I mean, I guess in a sense, like, it's like, well, you signed up for the job. It's like, did she really though? Is this what she wants to do? Because they could have been married before he decided he would like to become a pastor. And if that's the case, then she's really not wanting, like,
dragged, kicking and screaming.
Her thing. Or like even just people like what if she's like an introvert and she's like, listen, like I really don't want to be at the front, or I really am not comfortable with leading groups of people or heading up volunteer stuff, or like you're just automatically put in the spotlight and the expectation is that you will fulfill that role. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Why is that an automatic role? Everyone always likes to talk about gifting in church, but you're just throwing that gifting onto this person who their spouse might be really gifted in this area. And this might be what they want to do. But
it's amazing how many women have the gifting of hospitality.
Yeah.
It's weird, isn't it? I just thought
whether
that.
they like it or not.
Yeah, whether they like it or not, yeah. You've been
That's
really
funny.
good at serving tea and helping children. You have that gift.
On that, like, you know, I know for us, like Neil, like our parents were like a package deal. So like, but our mum was like she was like hospitality. She loved having people around. She loved going to people's houses. She loved spending time talking to people, praying with people, doing an exorcism here or prayer there. Like, you know, she was doing everything and anything. If there was some way she could kind of get stuck in. And like dad, like loved all his stuff, like, but they just like, they really did love doing it together. And like, it was never really a component of like, it didn't seem like it was an issue. Now I do think like they were undervalued because of that. Like they didn't ever really get paid a good salary, and they were only ever paid one salary. So I think there's that like underpinning expectation of like the pastor's wife should be doing all those things as well, which I don't know how much mum felt she had to live up to or not. Because she just lived up to it regardless, I guess. But I'm interested, like, is that something that you picked up on, like growing up, like that dynamic was going on? And then I guess, Jessie, I'd be really intrigued to hear how your folks operated as leaders in the church and stuff as well. Or yeah.
I think it was what I wanted from what I said previously, what I was looking for. Not that I was looking for a wife, but what I would like to have as a wife that's really good in sex, and but like to have somebody who's strong. And I think because my mum was a bit like that, my mum was powerful, very like, I guess my dad, I'm trying to think, because of that generation, they were still kind of, I think if they were where we were now, they would be more liberal, but they grew up, I'm trying to think, when were they church members? 80s, or is it later than
Yeah,
80s?
I mean, like, what's dad should have been
all the way
like?
to like the noughties, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, so like late 70s, early 80s, like they were like
But I think
in their 20s. And
for their time, they were very liberal, but maybe not to today's standard. So that would still maybe be the head of the house. But mom kind of wrote his sermon.
Yeah,
like he
she did a lot.
Mom got dad through Bible school. Like she wrote all his not homework, but like all his essays or whatever. Yeah.
I remember dad was telling me a story recently where he was saying like he got pulled in by his like the leader of the course, and he basically was just like, listen, Howard, you've been in the Bible school for a couple of years, and you've been scraping by. We know you get it, and we know you're good at like what you do, like the teaching, you're passionate about Jesus, but your essays have been pretty crap, and like you scrape through, and that's fine. That's not important. They were like, like it's all about Jesus. It's about being passionate. If you be a great pastor, you don't need to write an essay. He's like, but ever since you got married, your essays have been like incredible. We're just like, it's kind of a bit, and I'm just like, that's so funny, because like they were like, oh, someone else is writing his essay suddenly.
Yeah.
Like, it was just so obvious to them. They were like, just amazing.
So, but yeah, I don't know. So mum was, I think dad was very charismatic. Like even now in Aberdeen, like everybody knows who he is. Like,
yeah,
he'll go into a room and he'll manage to like, he'll know this person, and like he'll be able to get favors and stuff. And David, our younger brother, David's a bit like that as well, isn't he? He's very. My mum was very much like, she read all the books, she knew all the. She was really dig deep, and not that dad didn't want to, but he's just not necessarily book smart. I think.
Yeah.
Because
that's something I hadn't thought about.
Mum was like a trained accountant, and she went to university, which is like very unusual for her. For her age to go into like. I mean, there was some girls who went to university, but it was very rare, however. So she was obviously somebody who wanted to.
She didn't train for ministry. She didn't train, that wasn't her. The thing I guess I never really thought about much is like when dad did leave the church and started working in a charity, mum like didn't suddenly go, all right, well, I'll get involved with your charity and help. Like, you know what I mean? Like she very much was doing her own thing. And actually it wasn't massively like, let me run your church for you. Let me help run a church. Let me be in the biggest leadership office in a church somewhere. Like she very much was very like, let me find some people that are really broken and help them. Let me, you know, and she did lots of great things. She would speak at a Women's Aglow and do all sorts of different things. Like, so she still was stuck in a lot of different areas. She helped with a church plant in Aberdeen and things like that. But like, it does make me wonder, looking back, I'm like, how much did she want to be doing so much of the things that she ended up having to do in that church?
Yeah.
You know, did she want to be like basically the kids pastor and the youth pastor? Because that's what she was, because she was the mom and like half the youth and the kids were her kids. But nothing massively in mum screams to me someone that wanted to be a youth or kids pastor.
Well, as well as when we were kids, most families, when they get invited by church members to go, like in the past, gets invited to go to meals and stuff, the wife comes, the children come. We did that sometimes, but a lot of the time we as kids didn't go and mum did not go.
Yeah.
Oh, I hated that. And even when Dad was working as the Christian charity, you get invited to all these bowls and fundraising things and stuff. Dad loves it, absolutely. He loves talking to anybody. Loves like talking about his charity. But Mum was like, I'm not going to any of those things. They hated the idea of it.
Your mom was so good at intimate conversation.
Like she must have done a couple. I'm sure she must have done a couple that Dad maybe like, please could you come? People think I'm single, you know. But yeah,
so
I can't remember what the original question was actually.
No, I guess I was intrigued how you perceived it. It sparked in me even new thoughts of like that dynamic of like, oh, in the church, a woman just comes with the husband. If you if you're paying for a pastor, you get a free wife that does a whole bunch of things for the church for free. And I don't know, some churches pay both the husband and a wife, and some people like even employ just a wife or whatever. But generally speaking, I think that's a pretty common.
Part that we were always in small churches as well, where like, you know, if I was a church in a mega church, which he never wanted to be, I think. He would have a budget to hire a kids pastor, and he'd have it.
Yeah.
Well, we had a church that was always called the church to, the worst churches in the world, where like there was 8 old people, and then he was a pastor for 2 years, and they voted him out because he was trying to, teach biblical stuff, and they were like, I just want to, he brought the youth in. It's like, that's what you told me to do when you gave me the job. It's like, yeah, but now they put their feet up on the chairs, and we moved around or whatever. So I think like it's kind of like if Mum didn't do it, Dad would have done it all.
Yeah.
So I wonder if part of that was. It's interesting because Mum always had a kind of like what you almost do now. She found people from the outside. She didn't want to. She wasn't interested in the middle classery of church or the keeping up with the Joneses. She was like, I don't care about those people. I want to care about new Christians, drug addicts, poor people. Somebody came in stinking of alcohol. Mum was excited. She's like, whoa, somebody I can actually like help or whatever, which is interesting. I think all of us as Drysdales kind of have that. I don't know if that's influenced from Mum or not. And not that Dad didn't, but Dad obviously.
Well, Dad did as well, because he brought those people into church, and then the church hated Dad for like, oh, you got a homeless person saved, and now they're in church. We hate that. Get out.
I think that was facing up. Maybe that's because he went to Bible college. But he had the face of like, I can do the middle class.
Have you ever noticed when Dad prays, he prays in like a really English accent?
No.
Wait,
and now you've mentioned it. I'm not like.
Did he go to Bible college in Glasgow?
Yeah, no, but every time he prays, I think it's because his first job was like in England. But like he's like, for people that are listening, like he's got a Scottish accent, but when he prays, he suddenly turns like really English. It's just really funny.
When we get together, we're gonna have to be like, Howard, I think we really need prayer.
Yeah, ask him to say grace next time you get together for dinner or something.
What I was thinking about the other day is like, we never prayed during meals.
We never prayed. We never asked grace or
You can hold hands around the table.
Oh God, the Drysdales never held hands. Like we didn't show physical. I don't. I think the first time I hugged my mum was when I was like 26. Like
to be fair, they knew exactly what we were doing with our hands, so like they didn't ask. But no, I was thinking of isn't that weird? Like, because if I visit just his family, they're just like straight away trying to touch my hand, and I'm like, oh, all right, I'll play the. I'm sure God really appreciates us getting our food cold, and He's happy about that. But like,
did you all wash your hands before the meal?
I don't know. I just think about
Drysdale.
But now I see other people do it. I think, oh God, it's very religious. But maybe it is a nice thing as well, or whatever. It's a familiar thing of like, I don't know. But yeah, I just thinking of this like, oh, we weren't really a normal family at all.
Well, things like that, like hugging and like even saying "I love you" to like one another. Like I remember when I was at Bethel, like people would say like "I love you" to each other all the time, and I'm like, gosh, this is weird, but I kind of like it. So after a while, I got used to it, and I was like, I don't think we do this as a family. And I started noticing when I Skyped back home to the UK to my family, and I'm like, no one's saying I love you. And I would be like, love you guys, I'll catch you later. And they'd be like, all right, bye. And I'm like, and like, not even joking, it was like probably a year of me going, all right, love you guys. That like, I think, you know, like it was like mom or someone was like, oh, I love you too. And I was like, did it. Finally kind of broke that. Now, there was no question that our parents loved us, right? Dads would like drop anything to help us, to go to a football game. You know, mom was always around, dad was always around. Like, as much as they loved ministry, we were a priority in a huge amount of ways. So there was never a question of whether they loved you or not, but it was like the way that we expressed it was different, and that was for whatever reason.
A British thing as well, maybe, where we're
probably a bit British,
conservative of our feelings, or we don't want. Where Americans are, or generalizing, obviously, but Americans are a bit more vocal.
Yeah, maybe.
I remember, like, even as in probably up to a pre-T lying in mum and dad's bed. I didn't have separate beds like some weird family, but like I remember going into the West
Mum
Wing.
spent a lot more time in her bed though, in the bed, yeah.
But and just like lying and like she would like stroke my hair and stuff, but she never said I love you.
I didn't know that was an option. I love getting my hair stroked.
I have to say though, like, if there is a level, although the words "I love you" may not have been said on the regular for you guys, there is a level of outward expression of love that isn't words, and there's a level of friendship and intimacy in your relationship with your parents that not everyone has.
No, absolutely.
And what I mean by that is, like, so when we were dating, I was invited to like come over to stay for the weekend because like you guys lived downtown.
And then you never moved out, right?
No, that you hadn't moved out at that point or whatever. But anyway, we come in. So we were both working in a restaurant at this point, which means that we were finishing at like 10 o'clock at night or whatever. Quite late by the time the bus arrived back at the house. Yeah, it was late. Your mom was still up. And Neil's like, oh, come on, let's go say hi to my mom. Now she's in bed in her pajamas. I've maybe met her a couple of times. Like, she's lovely, but we're not besties at this point.
You're not like bed pajamas friends yet.
Yeah. Like, and I'm trying to think of like how many of my friends have my friends I grew up with, who, like, how many of their parents have I ever seen in their bed? Zero. Like, like if we had a sleepover and I like saw their mom or dad in the morning in the kitchen, they might in their pajamas, but to take that to the bed itself, that never happened. Anyway, like, we ended up sitting on the bed with your mom and having a full-blown conversation as your dad was probably like, I really want to get to sleep now.
He had his Darth Vader.
No, he didn't have it. Sleep apnea mask or whatever. Yeah. But like, I was like, my first reaction was, what is this? Like, what is going on here? Because it would never occur to me to be like, hey, let's go to my parents' room and sit on their bed and have a chat. So like, although your parents maybe didn't outwardly say, I love you on the regular, I think there's expressions of love that came from your parents that were really beautiful. Yeah. And that one that was like, wow, this is really nice that you feel a level of intimacy with your parents that you're like, it's 11 o'clock at night. She's still up waiting for you to come home, although you're a fully grown adult.
Oh, that was really annoying when we went to go, like, when you became a teenager, you wanted to go out. And she would be like, well, I'll be up. And you get in at like 2 a.m. and she'd be like, is that you, Neil? I'm like, yes, I'm home now. You can go to sleep. It's like,
I'm going to go throw up.
As a teenager, that probably would have been really annoying, but like,
so annoying.
As an adult, it's like, oh, this is really sweet.
Yeah.
But yeah,
no,
like,
we are like really. I mean, the more I'm around different people and their family units, the more I'm like in awe of like how close our family is. Actually, it's really awesome, really incredible. Like, very, very fortunate. Even just thinking, like, right back to the very beginning of this conversation, like, the way we were brought up, despite being inside evangelical Christianity as pastors' kids, we were given so much freedom, so much grace, so much room to explore our own kind of beliefs and ideas as well. Freedom. I remember mum teaching me, like, don't just believe something because me or your dad say it. Like, you got to think about it and question it and realize, like, we're going to make mistakes sometimes. And I'm like, not many, like, as parents, never mind Christian parents, bring their kids up that way. It's a really amazing thing for sure, big time. Yeah. So what was like in your church growing up, like, was that a component within the leaders and stuff as well? Because it feels like that's a very much built into American culture, is kind of like a woman is just expected to be involved in her husband's work. If it's a, like, Christian ministry leadership. I mean, if it's like an accountant, you're expected to just
it's definitely unspoken. Like, it's not like, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't particularly there when my dad signed the contract to become associate pastor, and like, you know,
it wasn't in the contract.
I don't know if there was a clause that says your wife shall be involved. But like my mom did Sunday school for the kindergartners. She ran like a summer daycare at one point. Like, I guess for working parents, I think it was like one summer. I don't know what happened after that. She did translation. She did a women's Bible study. She did this like apple pie baking thing, and they sold it, all these like thousands of pies every year, and the money went towards missions. And then anytime there was like a potluck or anything, it was like, okay, we're here to move tables and set things up. And she was doing women's retreats, and she was she was very heavily involved in pretty much every ministry.
Especially ones sanctions that women could lead in.
Yeah. So like, yeah, like it wasn't like she didn't preach on a Sunday morning. She didn't preach in any capacity in that manner. She was definitely more of like a smaller, but then my mom isn't the, I want to be on the platform speaking kind of person either. So it's down to what she was more comfortable with. And she did what she was comfortable with. And she did it well. And she's still whatever church she's in a different church now because she's moved. And she's very involved. And she's involved in the House of Prayer in Brussels, and she's involved in all sorts of stuff. Like, that is her thing. She likes to be involved. But I do think there's an aspect of expectation that you will be involved. Now, the church I was in also I have to say, the leadership a lot of time were missionaries, which means that when a couple goes into missions, it's both of you going into missions. Yeah. So it could be different on that aspect as well. And it could be that my mom went into so much volunteering, because she was a stay-at-home mom, and we all eventually were off at school, because by the time we moved back to Belgium, I was going into primary 1 or first grade elementary, and my brother and sister were in like kindergarten. So she had time. Yeah. Still. And so that gave her space to volunteer in all of these different ministries, because and it could be also that all of the friends that she was making with all the other wives in leadership, they were all volunteering in these same things as well. Yeah. The friendships that she formed also led to her being involved in all of these different things as well. And the fact that she still is involved in a lot of these things today probably intimates an enjoyment of these things, because like my parents aren't together anymore. And so like, she's not a pastor's wife, and yet she still is very much involved in all sorts of aspects of ministry. They've changed somewhat. She has volunteered recently to do like children's church before the pandemic happened. She was doing like children's church in the church that she's attending, but she's also moved into other things. Like, she's now doing some work with women who are in sex work in the city, and some of these women are also trafficked. So she does a lot of work with them too. And she has with these women like are really close to her heart. So I think, although she's not baking 2,000 pies to sell anymore, the aspects of her ministry have changed. I think, yes, there was an expectation that she would be involved, but I wouldn't say that she
particularly. She loved it on some level, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my mom wasn't like your mom, was a trained accountant. My mom's, I think her certification was in childcare. Okay. So that kind of lended.
Perfect Christian woman.
Yeah.
Like, she's professionally trained to stay at home with it.
But it lended itself well. I mean, when my dad was in the States, in Bible college, she did work in kindergartens and in daycares and stuff. And she did like I don't know if you'd call it a babysitting service, but I remember at one point were on campus, and she would look after a bunch of kids, I guess like child minding. And she would look after all these kids throughout the day, which was great for us because we were like, friends over.
Free friends.
But yeah, like in her little flat, and we'd go to the playground and she'd look after a bunch of kids. And yeah, she like, so like, she may have been career minded, but like, I think it translated into other things. So, but I definitely think that there is a lot of churches out there who think, right, we're hiring a pastor, youth pastor, kids pastor, associate pastor, senior pastor, whatever, and the wife is part of the package.
I mean, we joked about this via text and stuff, like, look through like, church staffing websites and, I don't know, the job websites and things like that, where they post the job like requirements or what they're looking for. And like, it's pretty cringe. Like, it is really cringe. And some of the things they'll even brazenly say, they'll be like, we require you to work 50 hours a week, not including services. And you're like, dude, you're telling someone that you're going to be working realistically not far from like 55 hours a week, 65 hours a week, probably a good 15 hours of different
like,
things.
Like advertised about.
Yeah. And it's like, that's a lot. Like, in the UK, if you work more than 50 hours, you have to like sign a specific contract to say that you're waiving your like human rights kind of thing. I mean, it's kind of crazy if you work more than 50 hours a week. We're like looking at like 35 as a kind of a new norm. And that's that was pre-pandemic. I think people were even questioning that. And then there's the church, going, all right, guys, I'm thinking like 65, 70 hours a week should be about right. How are you feeling about that? And everyone's like, yeah, it seems normal. Like, it's a weird kind of like,
and that's just for one person. But also what all encompasses in some of these roles is like, not one person can juggle all of these things.
Yeah.
Like some of the things are just like red flags immediately to me, is things like having in your job description a whole host of things, and amidst 20 different things that are listed, something that says like, and you'll do counseling. But further down in the job requirements, nothing as far as an accreditation to do counseling.
Right.
Like, wait, what qualifies you? Like, what training have you done?
Yeah.
That qualifies you to speak into someone's life when they're going through mental illness or trauma or anything of that sort.
Yeah.
Like, it's just,
Which is a whole world in itself, like the whole pastors thinking they are counselors. And it's even more scary when you start boiling that down to like, even in youth pastors, these youth pastors are basically, generally speaking, 20 something years old. They've just done like a quick seminary or something. Maybe some of them are still doing seminary and they're just like, kind of, oh yeah, you could be a youth pastor. You train to be like an associate one day or something. And like, they're 22 years old. They have no qualifications. They maybe took like a module in counseling at seminary. And then it's like, oh yeah, so you're going to be able to counsel like 16-year-olds that just lost their mom or are having like sexual identity crisis or something like that. And it's like, oh yeah, I got this. And then it looks like, people sitting down in the group going, right, so how many times do people masturbate? Or like, that's counseling to these people, it's like Jesus, no wonder people are getting screwed up here, Yeah. And it's scary. You look through those qualifications and like, they're terrifying.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it comes under pastoral care. So it's like, and you'll do pastoral care. But like, I mean, just looking at my dad, like his pastoral care was, I'm going to go and meet people individually to speak with them. I'm going to do hospital visits. I'm going to do like old folks home visits. I'm going to like, that's a lot. That's a lot of time. And like, depending on the size of your church, you've got a church of 500. We grew up in a church of 500 people.
Wow.
Like, that's a lot. That's a lot of people. And like, okay, not everyone wants you to come and visit them, but there's probably a good number of people that have got your phone number and are going to be calling you constantly saying, well, can you come over, or can you come speak to my kid or my wife and I?
People wonder why pastors just collapse and die or quit or whatever.
Burn out, yeah.
What was the one I saw in the CV Movement Laughter? It was like, I think we read like 4 or 5 youth pastor ones, and each one was like, must be able to lead worship or play an instrument or something. I'm like, so you're wanting him to be the worship pastor?
No, it was the one that was like, must write your own music as well as play. It's like, you want this person to organize events. You want to preach, teach, counsel, and find time to write their own music. But then also in the qualification was like, must read daily and their Bible daily and have devotion time. I'm like, when are they going to find time for all this amongst having to
and then, including the 50-hour week plus sermons or whatever. And it was underneath, every single one was like, and must do more if the lead.
If the pastor asks.
Right. What more could
That's
you
like
want?
a get out of jail clause. Of
and it's just so vague. It's like, must do whatever the pastor asks. It's like, God, you know that the pastor's calling him up at like 4 a.m. going, hey, we forgot to sing for the event today. Could you get up and like, could you bring 4,000 donuts for this huge event? Or, you know, I don't know, like, it's like, yeah.
Well, and then like, I don't know, like, we had an interim phase in the church I was growing up with where we didn't have like a formal youth leader. The guy that filled in again was like a really young guy, really great. But like, yeah, he was really young. And I so we kind of pitched in and helped out. And so we like just organizing like a basic Wednesday evening youth meeting. Like that's a lot of work. Like you got to, you know, come up with, because there's always some sort of icebreaker activity. Yeah. There's, you know, then there's the main sermon, then there's the worship, then like that's a lot of work in itself just for one meeting. And then you've got retreats and summer camp. And if you're into like, if your church is into like doing Christmas shows and Easter shows and all sorts of stuff, like it's a lot of coordination and a lot of work. And a lot of time, you know, it's just this one person that's taken on the job. What are you asking of this person, especially if they have a family?
Yeah.
Because if you're asking them to do a 60-hour week and they've got a family, how much time are they spending with their family?
Yeah. And then we get surprised that all these leaders end up like having dysfunctional family or having an affair on the side because they've disconnected from their wife, or, you know, like there's so much stuff going on, but like we burn these people to the ground and we set up this kind of thing of like, it goes God, church, family, or, you know, like about God, family, church. I mean, we set up these kind of systems, but even when you put church below family, well, God is at the top, and then you can kind of like, how do we split God and church apart? And then so you're like, you've got someone calling you at 3 a.m. and they're like, mom's dying in hospital. It's like, I can't not put that above, you know, but there's always one more thing. And it's a wild world, like growing up in that environment. I know, like for our dad, he was just nonstop. He just didn't like, he was great at prioritizing and occasionally going, no, I'm going to go and, you know, go to my kid's football game. I'm going to like, you know, I want to be home for dinner most nights or whatever. But he was nonstop meetings, meeting up with people, going, you know, sitting with like teenagers that were, you know, got pregnant and were having an abortion, or sitting with like, you know, people that were dying in hospitals, or, you know, whatever it was. Like he was constantly meeting with people and doing all these things. He was running a church, and being in the UK in smaller churches, you do it all, right? So you talk about how the youth pastor job's like a full-time job. Now, of course, it's when you've got a big youth group, a small youth group, it's probably not a full-time job, but it's probably not the job you need to be doing when you're doing all the pastoral visit, you're writing a sermon, you're running the youth group, you're running the children's group, you're running like everything. You can start to realize, oh yeah, I can see why wives were like, I could chip in if it means you come home a bit earlier every day, or it's a really complex and messy world for sure.
It's interesting, like, and also like the dynamics, like do these employees feel like they have permission to say I need time out? Like, so I worked for the church office, doing like put the directory together and a couple of, you know, silly things for about a month one summer, and one of a well-loved member of the church passed away, and it was going to be a very well-attended funeral. And I very much remember that the guy at the time that was kind of in the office, so like it was after my dad wasn't pastoring anymore, so the guy that was kind of like the admin / finance, he like kind of wore a lot of different hats. And I remember that day his wife was in surgery, and he was at the church trimming hedges, setting up chairs, doing paperwork, all sorts of stuff. Wow. In preparation for this funeral, amongst other like general church admin. And I remember being like, why are you here? Like, your wife is in the middle of town, like having surgery. Should you not be waiting for her to come out? And I remember going in to ask the senior pastor at the time to sign a document and, you know, going into his office, and he was sitting reading a newspaper. And I was like, you do realize, and I'm a teenager at the time. I'm like, oh, it's not my place to say anything. But I remember thinking, like, this guy's wife is in surgery and he's running around trimming hedges, which is not his job, in preparation for this funeral. And you're eating a sandwich and reading a newspaper. Like, I get that, like, we're employing people to do certain job roles, but, like, we're also the church. We're supposed to be compassionate and, you know, the hands and feet of Christ and whatever you know, Christianese terms you want to use that are very often used. And here we are, where's the compassion in this situation? It's just mind-boggling.
It's a bleeding of worlds as well, though, because, like, if you're employed by church, right? I mean, if you're not employed by church, a lot of Christians are going to church, you know, like almost every day of the week in the evenings. They're going to a prayer meeting, they're going to the Bible study, they're going to the youth service where they're helping lead, they're going to church 2 days of the week. They're, you know, like, they're just go. That's someone that's not employed. And so then you go, like, okay, now you're employed. Well, what hours are what? Because you would probably be doing this anyway, right? You'd be doing that at a church if you're a good Christian. You'd be doing all those things anyway. So we're probably not. Are we paying you for that, or are we paying you for something separate? And we just expect that, because you can't really not do any of those things. Like, you know what I mean? Like, Dad would never have been able to go, I'm not going to prayer meeting this week. You're the pastor. You're running the prayer meeting. You've got to go to the prayer meeting. And so it's like this weird thing of, like, how do you draw lines? How do you say no? How do you say, like, it's such a messy world. Like, I think that's something I really respect about Mum, where she was just like, nope, not going to do that. And then Dad was always kind of like, oh, okay. Now, I don't know if Dad was, or was it maybe he was a bit upset about that. Maybe they had to deal with that. I don't know the ins and outs of how they navigated that, but I always did respect that. And I was very envious that we didn't get to do that at 16. Until we got to 16, we were like, if you're a kid, you go to church. That's the rules. But yeah, like, a lot of people that are employed by the church, there is no, like, oh, this is my like, I'm going to church because I love Jesus, and this is my I'm going to church because I work. It's all kind of one thing. So even though we say 50 hours a week, well, what, you're not going to cut the hedges when we've got a big event and chip in and help? Like, come on, Steve, what are you doing? Like, a good Christian would help, you know, like, that's what we would do. And that's what I pay you for. And you're like, well, I was at church like 4 times. And, well, you should be at church 4 times a week anyway. So, like, this is what, you know, it's such a messy, like, complex. And I don't know, maybe that pastor had a crazy day and was just having his lunch at 4 PM and quickly grabbing a sandwich and going, thank fuck, I can read a newspaper for 4 minutes. And you just walked in that way. Who knows, right? You know, we don't know anyone's story. So it's not about, like, saying there's good guys and bad guys in the system. I think it's the system that is the bad guy, right? It's not the people that are necessarily in it. I think it can make bad guys. I think it can kind of break people that are stuck in the system. But it is, like, it's a broken system when you kind of bleed those two worlds.
I think at the end of the day, like, what is your church, though? Like, it's all fine and well to have all these programs and the fancy lights and the fancy media and, like, but, like, if you're burning out employees over the fancy media and the lights, and, like, is it worthwhile? Is that, like, is having that extra retreat, extra camp, extra whatever more worthwhile than the family unit of this person that is tasked with doing all these extra roles?
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard. I think, you know, like, my parents definitely raised us as they felt was the best, you know, as they felt they were doing the right thing. But, and I, you know, like, said this to my dad before, we never saw him. Like, my relationship with my dad was never as close growing up because we never saw it. Like, he was always at a, you know, if we weren't in church, the whole family, for whatever was going on at the church, he was. And outside of office hours that were during the week, it was board meetings, it was small groups, it was hospital visits, it was all sorts of stuff. And then at the same time, he was trying to work on, I think it was his master's. But, like, he was then on, and then the next sermon that needed to be prepped, and because he always preached on the evening service, which was in French. So like there was always another thing. So even when he was home, it was usually busy, or he just needed time to unwind, because that's crazy. That's a lot of work. And like, I work full time. I know that when I come home, I just want to sit and zone out for a while. So, you know, the idea of like coming into whatever drama is happening with 3 kids, you know, it's a bit stressful. So like, I get it. But I think sometimes the demands that we have for the sake of the ministry has bigger repercussions on people and their families and their marriages and their lives in general, their mental health, their physical health.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, there's a lot of things that come alongside that. And yeah, you want to advance the kingdom of God or whatever, but at the expense of.
Yeah. Well, it's like, did you see, I posted on Instagram today, there was this powerful picture of, I think it's Middle Church, the church over in America. It's quite a progressive church. And there's just flames all around their like church sign. It's like, you know, Middle Church, come on in, or whatever, like whatever. I can't remember what it said. And their caption was, it was about like, there's all kinds of fires and there's lots of riots happening and different things like that. Riots or protests and all whatever our languages are around it. And they basically said our church was really, really fortunate not to be caught in the fire that happened really near our building. And they were like, but we need to remember what's important. And we would happily have our church burned to the ground if it meant one more Black life didn't have to be lost. And I think it's that concept of like, what are we doing here? Like, what does it take for us to change our perspectives? Go, who gives a fuck about a building? Someone died. Yeah. That's important. Or why the hell are we killing a family so we can have another prayer meeting? What's the point in a prayer meeting if families are falling apart? What's the point in a church service if people are burning out and it ends in, what's the point in this stuff if that's the kind of the result? And I think like that's the stuff that really challenges me for sure. Anyway, we've been going on for ages, so we should probably wrap up. Yeah, it's getting late. So you guys, you're fine. Like, it's nice and early, you know. I do this till like 3 a.m. most days. So, but I don't have a kid, so you guys will be up by 3.
Yeah, that's true. You're in.
Yeah. But this is really good. I'm assuming you guys do not want people following you on Facebook and Instagram or whatever.
We've deleted our Facebook recently.
You just, nice.
Our Instagrams are private and stuff. It's been great. I literally deleted my Facebook like a month ago. And it's been fantastic.
I love not being on Facebook. The best thing ever.
We love being able to like from following a lot of newer people recently. So a lot of the people that you've actually been interviewing, which has been really fantastic, and engaging with some of them has just been really great for us as well through this deconstruction process. So cheers to all of those guys as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're not in a space where we are wanting a platform of that
Good
sort.
call. I don't recommend it at all.
No.
I mean, we love the comment section. We bring the popcorn every time when we go, oh, Phil posted something. Let's cuddle up and watch
so
what happens.
The comments on Facebook or on Instagram are so much better, though. It's the Instagram. Facebook comments are just the worst. And actually, no, YouTube comments are the worst. Facebook comments are like second worst. But yeah, I just love Instagram so much. It's just such a nicer place, a nicer atmosphere. I don't know if I'm just stuck in a big bubble somewhere on Instagram, but it just feels much nicer. Cool. But yeah, no, thank you so much, guys. If people didn't realize, Neil's my brother, and that's his wife, Jessie. So I'll probably do an intro that actually explains that. But yeah, I don't know where I'll figure out a good point to start along our conversation.
It's really awkward sharing masturbation stories about your dad walking if you're not related.
Yeah, just walking in. My dad just walked in. We just went to the same church, and my dad just walked in on people. No. Yeah. That's so funny. But no, it's good fun. Really good fun. Appreciate it. Love you guys.
Love you.
Yeah, thank you. Finally someone said it back.
I'll stroke your hair next time you come.
Oh, thanks, man. I can't do that for you anymore.
I have hair left, so.
That's true.
Yeah. No, it's good to see you guys a lot.
Take care.
Yeah, we'll catch up again properly again.
Cool.
All right, love you guys. Bye.
Bye.